Eyebrow flash on greeting. Watch someone's face the moment they see you walk into a room. There's a window, maybe 1/6 of a second, where their eyebrows rise. That tiny lift. You probably miss it every time, and so does almost everyone else. But that micro-expression is hardwired into your nervous system, and it almost never lies. The eyebrow flash is pure recognition before anything else kicks in. Your brain is saying, I see you, and you matter. It happens before the smile spreads, before words form, before they've had time to think. It's the autonomic nervous system voting, the part of you that responds before your mind gets a say. Here's what sticks. When someone you care about doesn't flash, you feel the absence without quite knowing why. Everything else looks fine on the surface. They're polite, they smile, they say the right words, but that eyebrow stayed flat. The encounter feels faintly hollow, a little withholding, and your gut picks up on it before your conscious mind catches up. So what does the missing flash actually mean? It means they weren't genuinely surprised or delighted to see you in that split second. Maybe distraction, maybe stress, maybe their mind was already somewhere else, or maybe the relationship has quietly cooled and neither of you knew how much until that moment. Or something harder still, maybe they've silently decided something has shifted between you. The eyebrow flash is nearly impossible to fake because you can't will it to happen. A skilled liar can manufacture a smile, can arrange their words perfectly, but that involuntary lift belongs to the part of you that operates before performance begins. It's your body's vote before ego takes over. Start noticing it, and you'll catch a lot. People who genuinely light up when you arrive, even just a flicker, and people who've gone still. That information is raw data, the kind your body already understands. It's not judgment, it's just the unguarded truth underneath the hello, the part that slips through before anyone has a chance to curate the moment. Pupil dilation mid-conversation. Your pupils dilate when light dims, sure, but they also dilate when something captures your attention. When you're interested, aroused, or suddenly alarmed, it's automatic. You can't fake it. Neuroscientist Eckhart Hess discovered decades ago that pupils don't lie. He showed people pictures of babies and landscapes while tracking their eyes, and the pupils dilated hardest to whatever the brain found most magnetizing, most compelling. Fast forward to real life. You're telling a story at dinner, and you notice their eyes widen just slightly as you hit a particular detail. A confession, a vulnerability, a joke that lands just right. That moment is neural honesty. Their brain is leaning in, even if they're trying to play it cool or hold back. The flip side matters just as much. Pupils that stay small or contract during what should be intimate conversation can signal disinterest, discomfort, or emotional distance. Not a final verdict, but a whisper from their nervous system that something isn't landing. Here's where it gets tricky. Pupils respond to emotion, intensity, and genuine intrigue, but not always romantic interest. Someone's pupils might dilate because they're fascinated by your argument, horrified by your story, or genuinely anxious about what you'll say next. Context matters enormously. A question during a heated debate will trigger different pupil response than a question during a confession. But here's what makes this worth knowing. If you're ever wondering whether someone is truly present with you, whether they're actually engaged or just going through the motions, this is one of the few tells your eyes can't override, no matter how much your face tries to lie. Next time you're in a vulnerable conversation, sharing something real, or testing whether they care, take a breath and watch. Not in a creepy way, but in a grounded, curious way. Those small circles in their eyes will often tell you something their words are still figuring out how to say. Blink rate suppression. Watch someone's eyes the next time you're in a conversation that actually matters. A crush, a boss, someone you need to read. Not in a creepy way, but notice whether their lids are moving at their normal easy rhythm or whether there's something almost frozen about them, like their nervous system just hit pause. Most of us blink about 15 to 20 times a minute in a relaxed state, but the moment something feels high stakes or we're hyper-focused on another person's face, that number tanks. Your brain deliberately down-regulates blinking when it enters threat detection mode, trying to vacuum up more visual information because something has weight. So when someone's blinks slow or nearly stop while talking to you, you're usually catching one of two things. Either they're deeply focused on you in a way that suggests real interest or genuine arousal, which could be attraction, anxiety, or fierce concentration, or they're actively clamping down on their expression, which often signals discomfort, or a subtle attempt to seem more composed than they actually feel. The catch is that the same suppression can read as either, "I'm hanging on your every word," or "I'm trying not to show you how nervous I am." Everything depends on what else is happening in their body. If someone's blink rate drops while they're leaning in, and their pupils are dilated and their shoulders soften, that usually points one direction. If it drops while they're physically pulling back, or their jaw tightens, or their hands grip something, you're getting a different story altogether. The real answer lives in what happens after the conversation ends. Does their blink rate snap back to normal, or do they stay wound up for minutes afterward? That's when you actually know whether the intensity meant something, or whether they were just wrestling with anxiety the whole time. The micro movements people can't script, the ones that live below the level of conscious control, those are where the honest answer lives, waiting for someone patient enough to look. Duchenne crinkle around the eyes. Watch someone's face the moment they see you walk in the room. Not the smile itself, but what happens around the corners of their eyes. A real smile pulls the skin up and in, creating those fine lines that radiate outward like a small map of genuineness. A fake smile, the mouth moves alone. The eyes stay flat, untouched, like a closed door. This tiny muscular difference, that involuntary crinkle, is called the Duchenne marker, and it's nearly impossible to fake because it runs on an ancient circuit your conscious mind can't quite control. When someone genuinely lights up at you, their orbicularis oculi muscle fires before they even know they're doing it. You'll see the crinkle first, the grin second. The reverse order means something else is happening. Politeness, duty, performance. The smile you give because you have to, not because you want to. Here's what makes this so valuable in everyday life. We're all desperate to believe we matter to people, so we lean hard on whatever signals we can grab. A full-mouth smile feels like evidence of care, but the eyes tell the truth that the mouth is trying to hide. Think about someone who actually enjoys your company versus someone obligated to be there. A partner at a family dinner, a boss at a casual gathering, the ones who genuinely want to see you light up their whole face, not just the lower half. The crinkle spreads, it softens the whole expression into something warm and involuntary. The ones who don't, smile, hold still, controlled, geometric, efficient. Look for the crinkle when you're testing whether someone's warmth is real or rehearsed. In conversation, after a joke, during eye contact. That's when the mask slips. Once you start noticing it, you'll realize how many people smile at you without their eyes ever joining in, how their gaze stays somewhere neutral or distant, even as their mouth performs. That's not a small thing to know about who's actually glad you're there. Mouth smiles without the eyes. You know that feeling when someone greets you with a smile and you walk away feeling nothing, maybe even a little cold. That's because their mouth showed up to the party, but their face didn't. A real smile is a full-body betrayal of what you actually feel. The corners of your eyes crinkle, your cheekbones rise, the whole upper half of your face gets soft, and you can't stop it even if you wanted to. When only the mouth moves, like a door opening on an empty room, something else is happening underneath. Maybe it's politeness on autopilot. Maybe it's the professional mask we all wear at work, the one that says, "I'm fine," while your shoulders hold their breath and your jaw stays clenched. But here's what actually matters. The eyes don't lie the way the mouth can. Your mouth can follow a script. Nice to see you. I'm happy for you. You look great. All while your eyes stay flat and checking the time or the exit. The gap between the two is where the real feeling lives, quiet and undeniable. It's not malice exactly. It's just that the depth isn't there, the warmth isn't there, the actual "glad to see you" isn't there. Someone who genuinely feels something toward you won't be able to help it. Their whole face lights up like you switched something on inside them. The mouth-only smile is the person doing their duty, honoring the social contract, going through the motions without inviting you in. And if you keep getting mouth smiles from someone who matters to you, a partner, a parent, a friend you thought was close, that's worth noticing, not as an accusation, but as information about where you actually stand. The quietest rejections often look like smiles. Next time you catch one, pause and ask yourself, how does my body feel around this person? Really, that answer your eyes already know is usually the truest one. Fake laugh onset timing. Watch someone's face the next time you land a joke. The real laugh arrives as a leak. The eyes crinkle first, a tiny twitch at the mouth corner. Then the sound follows a fraction of a second later, like the nervous system is already committed before the conscious mind catches up. A fake laugh reverses the whole sequence. The sound comes first, almost desperate, and then the face has to scramble backward to match it. There's a lag. A real laugh is something the body does before permission is given. A fake laugh is a performance that got scheduled one beat too late, and you can feel the gears shifting. Here's why this matters. When someone genuinely finds you funny, their neurology doesn't allow time for curation. The amusement happens. The nervous system fires. The noise follows. But when they don't actually think something is funny, and they choose to laugh anyway, kindness, politeness, the dread of silence, their brain has to override the default. It has to decide, translate, and execute. That delay is the seam you're spotting. Even if you can't name it, you might just feel something off, a sense that it didn't quite land or felt forced, and you're reading the temporal mismatch without conscious effort. The person laughing genuinely isn't thinking about laughing at all. The person faking it is running a small calculation in real time. Should I? When? For how long? And that tiny executive function takes a few milliseconds longer than authenticity does. It's not a crime. Plenty of good people laugh out of genuine affection, and that's not betrayal. But if you're trying to understand how someone actually responds to you, whether they're delighted or simply being diplomatic, the timing reveals what the smile alone won't hide. The order is everything. Does the laugh come before the smile, or does the smile have to chase it? Laughing before you finish. Someone starts laughing 3 words into your story, not at the punchline, but at you, at the moment, at the sheer fact that you're about to say something ridiculous. That early laugh is a tell, sharp and unguarded. It means they're not waiting to be entertained. They're already delighted just watching you set up the joke. Most people will politely hold their expression until the setup lands and the payoff arrives, because that's what strangers do. They give you the courtesy of silence, then reaction on cue, like a dutiful audience member. But when someone laughs before you even arrive at the point, before you've earned it, they've already decided you're worth the energy. They're not managing the interaction, they're living in it with you, which is the opposite of performative listening. It's anticipatory joy, the kind that slips out because they can't help it. The feeling you get when your guard is down around certain people, and everything they do reads as charming before it even registers as funny. That's the person who laughs early. They're not trying to validate you or seem engaged. They're already inside the joke because they're already inside your world. The quieter tell is what happens after the laugh lands. Do they laugh and look away, back to their phone, back to their own thoughts? Or do they stay present, eyes still on you, shoulders still turned toward you, waiting for the rest of the story? The ones who stay are the ones betting on you, giving you permission to be unpolished, to stumble through the setup, to exist without performing. That kind of trust doesn't come from obligation or social script. It comes from genuine interest, the kind that starts before you've earned it, because they've already decided you're worth the risk of their attention and time. Watch for it in the people you care about most. That premature laugh, that jumping the gun delight, the way they can't quite hold it back. That's someone telling you they like you before you've even finished proving why they should. Micro grimace before agreement. Watch what happens the next time someone says yes to something they're not thrilled about. A muscle twitch, a flash across the face so fast you almost miss it, a tightening around the eyes, a pinch at the corner of the mouth. Then it's gone, replaced by a smile or a nod. That flicker, that's the real answer, arriving half a second before the polite one catches up. Your body doesn't lie on the same timeline as your words. Your nervous system votes first. The grimace happens in the gap between what you feel and what you've decided to say aloud. This is why people who are good at reading others tend to be very quiet observers. They're not listening to the words, they're watching the face underneath them. When someone agrees to cover your shift, lend you money, or come to your event, that micro expression tells you whether they're actually willing or just conflict avoidant. The person who genuinely wants to help you will light up or at minimum show relief, glad to be useful. The person who feels trapped, that's when the grimace lands. The stakes matter here too. Small asks usually sail through without a hitch. Of course I can grab your coffee. Big asks, those are where you'll see the real calculus. The face registers the weight of what they're about to commit to. And here's what makes this sticky. Most people won't tell you they're unhappy about agreeing. They'll do it resentfully, check in less often, or find ways to make it harder on you without ever saying a word. But if you'd seen that grimace, you could have said, "Hey, no pressure, I can figure it out." That one observation can save you a friendship. The next time someone agrees to something, especially something that costs them time or energy, spend a half-second watching their face, not to accuse them of lying, but to know whether you need to follow up with, "Are you sure?" The grimace is permission to let them off the hook. Lip compression while listening. Watch someone's mouth the next time you're telling them something that matters. Sometimes their lips tighten, like they're holding something back, pressing the words down before they escape. That tiny clench is not boredom or discomfort alone. It's often disagreement, doubt, or frustration that they're actively choosing not to voice. And the body is doing the policing. You're watching the moment they decide not to interrupt, not to correct you, not to say what they really think. It's restraint, and restraint is always a message. When someone genuinely agrees with you and feels safe in the conversation, their mouth stays relaxed, loose, natural. Language flows both directions like it's invited, but when lips compress during your story, especially if it happens early and repeatedly, something is not landing right. Maybe they think you're wrong. Maybe they're annoyed and staying quiet to keep the peace. Maybe they've heard this before and are tired of the repetition. Maybe they disagree with your choices and are biting their tongue because they've learned it's not their place to comment. The compression is the leak. The body always speaks louder than the decision to stay silent. What makes this tricky is that compressed lips can also show focus. Someone listening so hard they're concentrating, sealing in the words so they don't miss anything you're saying. The difference is usually in the tension that ripples outward. Tight jaw, neck muscles working, eyes narrowed, that's conflict being swallowed. Calm face, just a soft line at the mouth, that's deep listening. Pay attention to whether the compression loosens when they finally do speak, or whether it stays locked, even as they talk. That tells you whether they're choosing discretion, or whether they're protecting themselves from saying something they know will land badly. If the lips stay pressed, even after they've given you their response, they're still holding back. And whatever they didn't say is probably the thing you most needed to hear. Nostril flare of contempt. Watch someone's face the moment they hear something they find beneath them. There's a tiny, almost involuntary widening of the nostrils, so quick your conscious mind nearly misses it, yet something in you registers the disdain anyway. It's not a sneer, it's barely visible most of the time. But your body knows. The nostril flare is one of the few facial muscles we cannot voluntarily control for long, which makes it a truth teller when everything else is performing politeness. In contempt specifically, the nostrils widen, a leftover from our primate ancestors flaring to reject a bad smell, except now, the smell is an idea, a comment, or the person delivering it. Think about the last time someone told you something you found ridiculous or insulting. Did you notice anyone's face contract and open again? Almost like a small recoil? That's the body saying what the mouth won't. Contempt is the most corrosive emotion in relationships. Researchers have found it's one of the strongest predictors of a marriage ending, and it shows up before the person even realizes they feel it. You might be explaining something important to someone and catch that briefest flicker across their nostrils, and suddenly, you know, they've already decided you're wrong, or worse, that you're not worth taking seriously. The thing nobody tells you is that contempt hides better than shame ever could. People can smile while their nostrils speak the truth. They can nod along while that micro-expression betrays their real feelings. They can say, "I hear you," while their body recoils from you. They can perform agreement perfectly while something primal in their face denies it entirely. So, if you're ever wondering whether someone truly respects you or is just going through the motions, watch what happens right after you say something that matters. That small widening, that almost imperceptible flare, that's your answer before they've even opened their mouth to lie. It's worth knowing the difference between someone who listens and someone who's already mentally left the room. Unilateral lip curl. Watch someone's face the moment they hear news they didn't want to hear. Maybe you just suggested something they disagree with, or you brought up a memory they'd rather forget. One side of their mouth pulls up just slightly, like they're fighting off a grimace. That's a unilateral lip curl, and it's one of the few expressions that's genuinely hard to fake because it lives in the muscles we don't consciously control. It's contempt's quiet cousin, and it slips out when someone feels superior, skeptical, or disgusted, often before they even realize it. The tricky part is that people rarely notice this in themselves. You might say something, and they smile and nod, but that micro-curl flickers across one side of their mouth for maybe half a second. What you're seeing isn't agreement or warmth. It's a little flash of, "I don't respect this," or "I don't buy what you're selling." It's different from a full smile because it doesn't reach the eyes and it doesn't involve both sides of the mouth equally. The asymmetry is what gives it away. When someone genuinely agrees with you or likes what you've said, both sides of their face move together in sync. This one-sided pull is the body saying something the mouth won't say. The real thing to sit with is that this isn't about malice or hatred. Someone can be genuinely fond of you and still throw out a lip curl when they doubt your logic, question your choices, or feel a flash of superiority in the moment. It doesn't mean they hate you. It means something you just said activated a moment of judgment or skepticism they couldn't quite suppress. You'll spot it most in conversations where there's an unspoken power dynamic. Maybe they think they know better, or they're testing whether you'll stand by what you said. The move is to notice it and then decide whether to address it directly or just file it away as data. Either way, you now know something was just dismissed, even if the words said yes. Chin jut of defiance. Watch someone's face the moment you say something that lands like a challenge or an edge they weren't expecting. Their chin doesn't stay soft. It pushes forward, just slightly, like they're physically bracing themselves or preparing to push back without words. That tiny lift is not about agreement or acceptance. It's a micro-expression that says, "I'm not backing down from this." And it tells you exactly how much your words, or your authority in that moment, actually threatened them, or rattled their sense of control. You see it in kids when a parent sets a boundary they don't like. You see it in partners when they disagree but aren't quite ready to argue out loud. You see it in colleagues when they think you're wrong but are holding their tongue while their body tells the real story. The chin jut is the body's way of saying no before the mouth catches up, before the social filters kick in. What makes it useful as a tell is that it leaks the truth before someone has time to edit themselves or construct a polished response. Someone might smile and nod and say, "Okay, you're right," but if that chin just nudged forward for a split second, they're already planning their counter-argument, already locking in their resistance. It's defiance in slow motion, quiet and stubborn, not explosive anger, but the person deciding they won't let you move them. If you're trying to understand where someone really stands, especially in a moment where they're being polite or measured on the surface, look for that tiny forward shift of the jaw. It's the tell that their agreement is surface level only, that something underneath is still fighting. And here's what happens once you notice it. You can't unsee it. You'll spot it in meetings, in family dinners, in conversations where someone is swallowing their real reaction. The next time you see that chin jut, try pausing instead of pressing. Sometimes naming the resistance, not attacking it, just acknowledging it exists, is what finally opens the door to what they're actually thinking. Shoulder shrug during denial. Someone swears they didn't say something cruel, and as the words leave their mouth, both shoulders rise an inch toward their ears. It lasts maybe half a second. They probably don't know it happened, but your nervous system felt it. A tiny betrayal in the body that contradicts the claim in their mouth. That shrug is the body's way of saying, "I'm not actually sure about this," or sometimes, "I know you won't believe me anyway." When the shoulders rise during a strong denial, what you're really witnessing is doubt meeting defensiveness. The brain knows the statement it's about to protect is shaky, so it literally tries to shrink away from it. The person isn't always lying. They might genuinely be confused, or they might be defending a version of themselves they wish was true. But the shrug always means something is off balance inside them. The tricky part is that we hear the words and forget to watch. We get caught in the argument instead of noticing the signal. Someone says, "I would never do that," and their shoulders kiss their ears, and we waste energy debating the statement rather than asking ourselves why they needed to deny it so hard. Here's what matters. Denials that come with steady shoulders, eye contact, and a still body tend to be easier to trust. Denials that come with a shrug, a head tilt, or a hand wave are the moments when someone is selling a story they're not fully buying themselves. You don't need to call it out. Just notice. File it away. Watch what happens next. Because when a person is comfortable with the truth, their whole frame settles. They don't need their shoulders to apologize while their words stand firm. The shrug is a whisper the body makes when the mind is trying to convince you of something it hasn't convinced itself of yet. Pay attention to the frame before you pay attention to the story. Head shake while saying yes. You ask someone to help with a favor. They nod their head and say, "Yeah, of course." But their head is doing the opposite. It's a tiny left-right wobble, almost involuntary, the kind of thing they probably don't even notice they're doing. That shake is their body vetoing what their mouth just agreed to. It's a reliable betrayal we miss because we're trained to listen to words, not the skeleton underneath them. The shake says, "I don't actually want to do this." The yes says, "I'm uncomfortable saying no to you." When both happen at once, you're watching someone split themselves in half to keep the peace, or to avoid disappointing you, or to dodge conflict entirely. This matters because people with a head shake attached to their yes will resent the task later. They'll do it poorly, or they'll bring resentment into the room, or they'll forget the whole thing. You're not getting a real yes. You're getting a performance, a social script running on autopilot. The person has already decided internally that they don't want to, but their social programming is stronger than their honesty in that moment. If someone you trust does this, the kindest move isn't to pretend you didn't see it. It's to make space for the real answer. Try saying something like, "I can tell you're hesitant. What's actually going on?" Most people will exhale. They'll tell you the truth. They were waiting for permission to be honest, for someone to notice the gap between their words and their body, and offer them a way out. People remember how you let them tell you no. That kind of permission becomes rare in most relationships. It becomes why they trust you with harder things later. So next time you see the shake under the yes, don't push forward. Pause. Notice. Give them the out they're already sending you in body language. You'll be one of the few people in their life who ever did. Nodding in threes. Next time someone is listening to you talk, watch their head. Really watch it. Some people nod once, that's a signal. Some nod twice, but pay attention to who nods 3 times in a row, steady and rhythmic, before they respond or look away. That triple nod pattern is rarely random, and it's almost never a sign of deep engagement. What you are actually seeing is someone moving through a mental gate. I heard you. I am processing this. I am about to move on. The 3 nod is a punctuation mark dressed up as interest. It reads like active listening on the surface, but the rhythm tells a different story. It's the polite version of checking your watch. Real engagement usually looks messier. 1 nod that holds. A tilted head. Eyes that soften or sharpen. Someone who leans in and then forgets to lean back out. The 3 nod, by contrast, is almost mechanical. It happens when someone is being kind, but has already decided what they think, or when they are waiting for their turn, or when they simply do not have the bandwidth to go deeper. None of that makes them a bad person. We all do it in conversations where we are tired, distracted, or just not connected. But here is what sticks. If you notice someone triple nods you consistently, especially in moments when you are sharing something that matters, that is quiet data about where you rank in their attention economy. They are doing the minimum version of care. If this person matters to you, the move is not to perform louder or longer in hopes of breaking through the pattern. Instead, notice whether they nod differently with others, or whether they ever sit still enough to let a silence happen, or whether they ask you a question that digs past what you said, or whether they remember the small details you mentioned weeks before. That will tell you whether the distance is about you, about them, or about whether this relationship actually has room to grow into something more real. Delayed nod timing. You are talking, and the person across from you nods. But here is the thing. It does not happen while you are speaking. It happens a half second, sometimes a full second after you finish. That lag is not a glitch in their attention. It is a tell. A person who genuinely tracks your words in real time nods along with the rhythm of what you are saying, almost like their body is keeping time with your meaning. The head move arrives with the idea, not after it has already landed and gone cold. When the nod comes late, it often means they have switched into a different mode. They are no longer following. They are performing agreement. They heard the sound. They understood the words at surface level, but they were not riding the wave of your thought. Instead, they waited for a natural pause, then supplied the expected gesture, the social token that says, "I was listening," even if their mind was elsewhere or already formed an opinion and stopped tracking details. This does not always mean malice. Sometimes it means tiredness, distraction, or a mind that processes slower than usual. But paired with other signs, a lack of follow-up questions, a flat tone in the response, an eagerness to change subjects, the delayed nod becomes part of a pattern. It is the gap between their body's autopilot and their actual engagement. The flip side matters too. People who are genuinely curious, who have shifted into deep listening, often nod before you finish the thought, as if their body anticipates where you are going. That synchrony signals real investment and intellectual alignment. The beauty of this tell is that it works across almost every relationship: professional, romantic, friendship. Next time you are in a conversation that matters, notice where the nod lands. Is it dancing with your words or arriving late to a party already over? Head tilt, exposing the neck. Watch someone when they're genuinely listening to you, not scrolling, not planning their response, just actually with you. Often, their head will tilt slightly to one side, and in that tilt, their neck becomes visible, that soft, vulnerable part, usually guarded. This matters because the neck is one of the few places we can't defend ourselves. It's where our major blood vessels live, where predators in nature go for the kill. So when someone exposes it toward you, even a little, their body is saying something their mouth hasn't caught up to yet. It's a trust signal hiding in plain sight. You see it in partners leaning into an argument instead of away, in kids genuinely interested in what you're telling them, in someone who feels safe enough to drop their guard. The inverse cuts sharp too. When someone keeps their chin tucked, shoulders hunched, neck protected, you're usually talking to someone in defense mode, even if they're smiling. The head tilt itself isn't complicated neurology. It pairs with the listening face, where one eyebrow slightly raises and the eyes soften. But the neck exposure is the honest part, because we don't consciously control it the way we control words. You can fake attention with your mouth and eyes for maybe 30 seconds before your body betrays you. Someone tilting their head toward you while their neck opens slightly is showing vulnerability and engagement at once, which is rare and hard to manufacture. Here's where it gets subtle. Not everyone tilts their head the same way. Cultural backgrounds, trauma, personality type, they all shift the baseline. A person with chronic neck tension might never fully expose it. Someone from a guarded family might have learned young that vulnerability isn't safe. But when you know someone's baseline, that small tilt becomes a marker. It tells you when they've shifted from surface politeness into genuine connection, when the wall comes down just enough that you can actually reach them. Next time someone is really listening, look for the tilt. It's one of the few things harder to fake than words. Torso angle toward you. Stand across from someone in conversation and notice where their chest points, not their face, their actual torso. People can fake a smile or nod while their shoulders stay twisted toward the exit or the other person at the table. And that gap between what their mouth says and where their body leans is where the truth lives. Your body doesn't lie about whether you're genuinely interested or just passing time because you're trapped there. When someone tilts their whole torso toward you, not just their head cocked like a curious bird, their nervous system is saying yes before their brain can edit the answer. It's the difference between someone leaning in at a bar because the conversation is magnetic versus someone who stays angled sideways, keeping their shoulder as a barrier between you and them. You've felt this. You know the feeling of talking to someone who keeps their torso open to you like a door versus the one who keeps their front aimed at the clock or their phone or the crowd. This matters because torso orientation is one of the hardest signals to fake during sustained interaction. You can hold eye contact for a sentence or two if you're trained to. You can turn your face towards someone while strategizing your escape route. But your whole chest, your core, your vital organs, keeping those aimed at someone requires actual comfort. It requires that your threat detection system isn't screaming at you to keep your vulnerable side protected. So next time you're mid-conversation, do a quiet scan. Is their body saying welcome or is it saying exit? And maybe more important, what is your body saying about how safe you feel with them? That micro angle often tells you more about the relationship than anything either of you will say out loud. Watch for it, especially when someone shifts their torso away mid-conversation. Not a big dramatic turn, just a subtle recalibration, because that's your nervous system detecting a drop in safety or trust, even if the words keep flowing. Foot direction when talking. Your feet know where you want to go before your mouth does. Watch someone mid-conversation. Not their face, not their hands, but their feet. If they're angled toward you, weight settled, one foot planted, while the other stays loose, they're genuinely present. But if their toes point sideways or slightly away, even while they're smiling and nodding, something in them is already leaving. It's called the foot compass, and it almost never lies because feet operate on autopilot while the brain is still performing for the room. Here's why this matters. People can fake eye contact. They can mirror your posture on purpose. They can even control their voice and word choice when they're trying. But the feet are honest. They point toward what you actually want, not what you think you should want. So when someone you care about is talking to you, but their feet angle toward the door or the phone or away from your body entirely, they're not fully there. And no amount of "that's not true" from them will change what their own legs just told you. The body doesn't perform for an audience the way the face does. It just votes with its weight. The trick is that this works in your favor too. If you're standing with someone and you feel the conversation going nowhere, check your own feet. Are they angled toward an exit, pointed at them? Your body knows if you want to stay before your mind admits it. And when you catch that misalignment, when your mouth says, "I'm listening," but your feet are already walking, that's when you get to choose. You can turn toward the person, you can plant yourself, you can shift your weight and mean it, or you can be honest about what your body already knows, which is sometimes the kindest thing you can do for both of you. The feet are just keeping score of where the heart actually is, and they're rarely wrong about it. Feet pointed toward the exit. Next time you're in a conversation with someone, glance down, not at your phone, at their feet. Most people have no idea their body is already leaving the room before their mouth has permission to. Feet are honest in a way faces learned to lie about years ago. When someone's torso angles toward you, but both feet point toward the door, toward their car, toward anywhere else, you're watching the truth in real time. They're not fully here. Part of them is already gone, and it's often because they're uncomfortable, untethered, or mentally calculating an exit. Watch a partner who says they want to talk, but their feet drift toward the kitchen. Watch a friend who leans in with a smile while their toes point past your shoulder. Notice it in yourself too, because this works both ways. Your body knows before your brain admits it. What makes this signal so reliable is that it's unconscious. Unlike a nod or eye contact, which we can fake or perform, feet just point where the nervous system wants to go. They don't rehearse. They don't care about being polite. A person can maintain eye contact and say kind things with their entire upper half, while their feet stage a quiet rebellion. The gap between what they're saying and where their feet are pointing is where the real conversation lives, the one they're not ready to speak aloud. So here's what matters. Don't use this as ammunition. Don't weaponize it or call someone out mid-moment. Instead, let it teach you something gentler. If their feet want the exit, that conversation isn't landing the way you hoped. Maybe it's the timing. Maybe they're scared. Maybe they're already pulling away because they've decided something you don't know yet. But the feet know, and now you know that you know. What you do with that knowledge, whether you give them space, ask what's really going on, or accept that they're not ready, that's where the wisdom lives. Crossed ankles under stress. Watch their feet during the hard conversation, the job interview when it turns personal, the family dinner when money comes up, the moment someone asks what they've been avoiding. Most people have no idea what their ankles are doing. You'll catch someone with feet flat on the floor, suddenly lock their ankles together, one leg wrapping slightly around the other, in a small, almost invisible bind. Your nervous system reads it instantly as a retreat, a pull inward, the bodily equivalent of stepping back without actually moving. That ankle lock is saying, "I need to protect myself right now," and it bypasses all the careful words the person is still trying to use. The interesting thing is that this tightening shows up most reliably when someone feels cornered, judged, or emotionally threatened, not casual leg crossing like you do while relaxed and chatting, but a genuine contraction, a cage made of their own limbs. When someone is truly at ease, their legs stay loose and open, almost careless with space. But under pressure, the ankles clamp down like a reflex. You'll see it in the moment the interview question gets too close. You'll see it across from you when you're asking for a truth they don't want to admit. You'll see it in the mirror when you feel yourself tightening before a defensive response. The honesty is almost brutal because people almost never know they're doing it. Their face is performing calm while their body is literally bracing for impact. And that gap, that disconnect between what they're saying and what their legs are saying, is where you actually learn who they are in that moment. The move isn't to call it out. That kills the safety you've just spotted. Notice it in yourself first. That ankle lock is your body's smoke signal that you've shifted into protection mode. When you feel it happen, slow down. Ask what you're actually protecting from. Sometimes that one pause is enough to choose a different posture entirely. Self-soothing under pressure. You're in a tense conversation. Maybe something you said landed wrong, or the stakes just got real, and you watch them. Do they reach for their phone, tug at their sleeve, touch their face, rub their neck, fidget with a ring? These tiny, almost invisible moves are a window into how safe they feel with you in that moment. When someone genuinely cares about you, they tend to self-soothe differently. depending on whether they trust you'll understand their anxiety or judge them for it. If they're pulling inward, wrapping their arms around themselves, avoiding eye contact while their leg bounces, that's often a sign they're managing their own distress alone without expecting you to help. But watch someone who feels secure with you. They might still fidget, still need to move, but there's less of that defensive bracing. Their self-soothing looks less like armor and more like permission to just breathe. They might even vocalize it, "I'm nervous about this," or "give me a second," because they've learned you won't punish them for being human. The real tell isn't whether they soothe themselves, it's how visible it is, how unguarded. Shame makes people hide it. Safety makes them soothe openly, almost unconsciously, because there's no energy left for hiding or performing. Someone who cares, but feels unsafe around you, will do their self-soothing in microdoses, hidden from your view. A quick jaw clench, a sharp breath in the bathroom, pressure on their own wrists when you're not looking. Meanwhile, someone who both likes and trusts you will soothe in front of you without apology. They'll hum, shift position, ask for water, take a real breath, scratch their arm. Pay attention, not to whether they're anxious, everyone is, but to whether they're letting you see it. That visibility, that willingness to be a little rough around the edges in front of you, to show the machinery of their own struggle, is how you know they're not rehearsing a version of themselves. They're just being, and they're betting you won't flinch. Grooming gestures near you. Your brain is always reading the room, and one of the sharpest tells lives in a gesture so small, most people miss it entirely. Watch what happens the moment someone knows you're about to walk in the room, or the second after you arrive. Does their hand drift up to fix their hair? Does their spine straighten, their collar adjust, their fingers find their face or their shirt? That micro movement, barely conscious, is their nervous system broadcasting something their mouth might never say out loud. Grooming gestures near you are a live signal. Your system reads another person's investment in how they appear around you and converts it into a quick calculation. Do I matter enough for you to care? It's not vanity exactly. It's attunement. When you genuinely want someone to see you well, your hands sometimes move before your mind even knows it's happening. Someone who fidgets with their appearance only when you're there is signaling that you've triggered a small spike in their self-awareness. They're aware they're being watched. They want the watching to go well. The reverse is equally loaded. The person who doesn't adjust, doesn't check, doesn't straighten anything around you might be comfortable, sure, but they might also be indifferent. And that gap between comfort and care is wider than most people think. Grooming sits in that gray zone, where intention and instinct blur together. A quick hair tuck could mean attraction, respect, nervousness, habit, or all four, but context is everything. If someone does it around everyone equally, that's just personality. If it spikes when you show up, if it happens in that narrow window before you arrive, or just after, that's when you're seeing something real, something unguarded. People don't usually notice their own gestures. They can't watch themselves groom. So when someone adjusts their appearance near you, they're not usually performing, they're reacting. And reactions, especially the small ones happening in real time, tend to be more honest than anything they could say. Pay attention to the timing. That's where the truth lives. Object barriers on the table. Next time you're sitting across from someone at a cafe or dinner table, stop talking for a second and just watch where their stuff ends up. A phone placed between you two like a border guard, a coffee cup angled away, hands kept busy with a napkin, a pen, a glass. Anything that creates a little moat. We do this unconsciously when we want space, when someone makes us nervous, or when we're deciding whether we actually want to be there. The table becomes a map of the invisible distance in the room. Someone who's genuinely interested in you will often clear their side of the table instead. They'll move their phone to the side, set their bag down beside them, rather than between you. Lean forward without the clutter. Their hands stay freer for gestures, for reaching for a glass you offered them, for the kind of openness that doesn't need armor. But here's the thing that makes this tricky. Sometimes the barriers aren't emotional at all. Sometimes someone's just organized, or their phone genuinely needs to be there because they're expecting a call. Context matters more than a single snapshot. A person stressed about work might unconsciously shield themselves with objects, even though they like you fine. The real signal lives in the pattern. Does this person consistently use the table as a buffer with you specifically, while they're relaxed and open with others at the same table? Do they seem to soften the barrier over time as the conversation deepens, or does it stay locked in place? The subtle stuff, moving their glass slightly closer to yours, shifting a phone to make more us space. rotating their body toward you instead of away. Those micro movements often whisper louder than 1,000 words of reassurance ever could. Pay attention not just to what's between you, but to whether they're actively removing it, whether the barriers are softening, whether the table feels like a moat or an invitation. Physical proximity creep. You're standing at a party talking to someone, and over the course of 5 minutes, they've closed the gap between you 3 separate times. You step back, they step forward again. Not aggressively, just a slow, quiet drift into your space that they probably aren't even conscious of. That creep matters more than you might think. People don't shrink distance with those who feel risky or unfamiliar. They compress it when safety and attraction are both in the room. Watch someone standing perfectly still with a stranger versus how they lean, angle, and glide closer to someone they're opening up to. The body knows before the words do. This works the other way too. Someone who keeps their distance, even in moments designed for closeness, is telling you something clear. A handshake held a fraction too long, a hug where they don't fully settle into it, a conversation where they maintain a professional perimeter, even when you're both laughing. The nervous system votes long before the mouth weighs in, and proximity, especially the kind that inches forward over time rather than all at once, is revealing in ways that words can never quite capture. The trick is not to obsess over exact inches. That's performance theater for people trying to game the system. Instead, notice the trend. Does proximity expand when trust builds? Does someone get closer when the conversation gets real? Or do they stay on the border? Do they adjust their angle so they can watch your face or your hands? Do they mirror your distance or fight it? These are the small surrenders that happen before someone even knows they're making them. The unconscious geography of attachment. If you're paying attention to proximity creep, you're reading the room's honest conversation, the one happening underneath the words, in the space between bodies. That's where affection, comfort, and real investment actually live, coded into millimeters and angles and the slow, steady pull toward you. The body doesn't lie the way the mouth sometimes does, and distance is one of its clearest dialects. Choosing the seat beside you. A room fills up. The couch has one empty spot next to you. Someone walks in, glances around, and without hesitation sits right there. Or they scan the seating and deliberately choose the chair across the room. That split second tells you something real about their comfort with you, though most people miss it entirely because it happens so fast, it feels automatic. And it kind of is, but automatic doesn't mean random. Your nervous system makes that choice before your thinking brain catches up. When someone sits beside you, they're signaling that your presence doesn't make them anxious. Proximity feels safe or appealing enough that they'd rather be close than maintain distance. There's a vulnerability in sharing armrests and shoulder space. It means they're not bracing for conflict or keeping an exit route clear. The opposite matters too. If someone consistently chooses the farthest available seat when you're present, that's information, not always rejection. Sometimes it's shyness or sensory preference, but paired with other small choices, it becomes a pattern. What makes this so reliable is that people rarely strategize about where to sit. They follow an instinct born from how safe they feel around you. A new person attracted to you might pick the seat beside you to seem connected. A partner might do it out of habit and comfort. Someone uncomfortable will unconsciously optimize for space. Watch the hesitation more than the choice itself. If someone pauses, scans, then sits beside you, that deliberation suggests they're overriding a protective instinct because they want to be near you. If they sit down without thinking, they've already sorted you as safe. The really telling moment is when someone moves to sit beside you in a crowded room, even though the spot is less comfortable than an empty chair elsewhere. That's not efficiency, that's choice layered with something stronger. The next time you're in a room with someone you're trying to read, notice where they land before they've had time to think it through. Placement in group seating, where someone sits when they have a choice, tells you almost everything. Not the chair itself, the person they sit next to, and more importantly, who they don't. At a long table, at a dinner, in a car, on someone's living room floor, the person who matters to you gets proximity. They get the seat beside you, or diagonal from you, or within easy arm's reach. They get the spot where you can catch their eye without turning your whole head. You're probably doing this right now, without thinking about it. The inverse is colder, but just as loud. If someone likes you less than you think, you'll notice it through seating distance. Not because they run to the far corner, but because they don't fight for the close one. When the group settles in, they sit where it's convenient, not where you are. They don't angle their body toward you. Their attention doesn't follow. You become just another person in the room, not the person they arrange themselves around. Here's what makes this so reliable. Your body knows who you want close before your mouth does. If you're nervous about someone, you'll find yourself sitting slightly farther away, just enough to feel less exposed. If you're pulled toward someone, you'll pick a seat that lets you watch them without seeming to. Parents do it with kids. Partners do it across tables. Friends do it in group chats by leaning in during their stories. Strangers do it too. That slight tilt toward the person they trust, away from the one who unsettles them. The weird part is how deliberate this is, even when it's unconscious. So the next time you're in a group, notice where your body goes before your mind catches up. Who did you magnetize toward? Who did you keep at arm's length without deciding to? The answer usually matches how you actually feel, not what you told yourself. Your nervous system commits tiny betrayals when you're not paying attention, and it almost always tells the truth. Turning toward the group, not you. You're mid-sentence, telling a story at dinner, and you notice their body does this subtle swivel. Their shoulders inch toward the table. Their gaze drifts to the person next to them. They're still technically present, still nodding, but every soft signal is pointed away from you and toward the room. That move, that small geometry of attention, tells you something clean. You're not the magnet right now. Maybe you never were. The thing about attention is that it leaks. Bodies tell the truth before mouths do. When someone is genuinely interested in you, they lean in. Their feet point toward you even when they're sitting down. They turn their whole frame slightly, not just their head, as if you've got gravity. But when someone is politely enduring you or scanning for a better conversation to join, they do the opposite. They soften toward the group. They make themselves available to whoever else enters the circle. It's not cruel. It's the body saying, this person is fine, but not my priority. The real trap is mistaking politeness for connection. Someone can smile at you, ask follow-up questions, seem fully present in the moment, and still be angled elsewhere. They're being kind. That's not the same as being drawn to you. There's a world of difference between someone who turns toward you when you speak versus someone who turns to include you in a larger turn they're already making toward the room. One is choice, the other is accident. One says you caught them, the other says they're just being decent. If you find yourself always the one doing the turning, always the one curving your whole self toward them while they stay neutral and open to the room, that's worth sitting with. It's not about finding the right angle or saying something clever enough to lock their gaze. It's about whether you're worth the turn in the first place. Sometimes the kindest thing you can notice is when you're doing all the leaning and they're just standing still. Body block from third parties. Watch what happens when someone else tries to get physically close to the person you're wondering about. Do they lean in slightly, shift their weight, angle their shoulders just enough to block the space? That tiny wall they build around certain people tells you something their words never will. People don't usually think about the geography of their own bodies, where they stand, who they let near, whose approach they subtly resist. But it leaks truth like nothing else can. If someone truly values your presence and exclusivity, even in a casual group setting, they will unconsciously guard that closeness. A friend who touches your arm when laughing but stiffens when someone else tries, the same move is giving you data. Someone who positions themselves between you and a third party, creating a human shield without thinking about it, is showing preference in real time. The reverse is equally telling. If they open their body to everyone equally, create no boundary, allow anyone the same proximity they allow you, that's information too. It might mean they're just naturally warm and gregarious, or it might mean you're not special in the way you thought. The tricky part is context. A person who body blocks with you in a crowded bar might just be making room or following the natural flow of conversation. But notice the pattern over time and across settings. Does someone consistently create a pocket of space around you? Do they reorient their shoulders toward you, even when talking to others? Do they physically angle away from newcomers? These small spatial choices stack up, becoming a portrait of preference written in millimeters. Your nervous system already reads them. You've probably felt someone's openness or their barrier without naming it. The next time you're in a group, watch not what people say, but where they put their bodies. You'll see who considers proximity valuable and who's comfortable with everyone equally close. That's often where real feelings live, in the spaces they never consciously chose to protect or surrender. Bringing you into side conversations. You're at a gathering, and someone's mid-story with a group when they pause, make eye contact with you specifically, and say, "Oh, you'd know about this." Suddenly, you're woven into the thread, not watching from the outside. That moment isn't random politeness. It's a small, deliberate act of inclusion that signals something real about how someone sees you in their social world. People who care about your presence do this naturally, without thinking twice. They don't just talk around you, they create openings for you to step into. A joke lands, and they glance at you first before laughing. Someone brings up a hobby, and they turn slightly toward you, as if your take matters more than the generic consensus. They remember something you mentioned weeks ago and pull it into a current conversation, making sure everyone knows you're connected to what's being said. None of that is necessary. None of it costs them anything except a small shift in attention, but people do it anyway when you actually matter to them. The flip side is quieter and cuts deeper. When someone consistently talks past you, mentions stories about situations you were both in but frames them like you weren't there, or finishes an anecdote with, "Oh, you weren't there, right?" even though you were. That's also information, just the negative kind. It can mean they don't imagine you as part of their inner circle, or they're still actively deciding whether you belong. Side conversations are intimate spaces where people relax and let their real preferences show without a filter. When someone brings you into them, they're saying without words, "I want you to know what's happening here. I think you belong in this moment." Notice who does this across different settings: parties, work events, casual hangouts, group chats, and notice who consistently leaves you standing on the outside looking in. The pattern you see matters far more than any single instance, and it will tell you everything you need to know about where you actually sit in someone's world. Introducing you by role. Walk into a dinner party with someone who genuinely cares about you and listen closely to how they introduce you to strangers. "This is Sarah, my colleague," they say. Flat, functional, done. Or they turn and say, "This is Sarah. She's the one who caught that thing everyone else missed at work, and I've stolen half her ideas for my own projects." Same person, vastly different message about what you actually mean to them. The first introduction reduces you to your utility. The second makes you real. What reveals itself in that moment is whether someone sees you as a full human or as a role you play in their life. When people genuinely value you, they volunteer extra information. They add color. They mention something you've said that shifted how they think, or a skill that actually impressed them, or a time you showed up for them in a way that stuck. They're not checking a box. They're giving the room a real picture of who you are. By contrast, someone who introduces you only by function, "my boss," "my old friend," "my dentist," is keeping you in your utility slot, not always out of coldness, but they're not fighting for you to be seen as anything beyond what you do for them. But notice something else too. When they introduce you, do they seem proud? Do they make eye contact with you first, or just mention you in passing while facing away? Do they pause long enough for the introduction to actually land, or do they rush it like another task? The people who love you give you real estate in their words. They make you real to people who don't know you yet. That small generosity, spending an extra sentence on your actual self instead of your job title, is how you know you're not just filling a role in their life. You're someone they're genuinely excited to have in the room. Introducing you to their people. You get the text, "Hey, coming to my sister's thing Friday. Want to come?" And you freeze a little because you know what that means. When someone brings you into their orbit, into the spaces where their real life lives, they have already decided you belong there. It is not casual. A person who is lukewarm about you keeps you in a separate box, away from the people who shaped them, away from the witnesses. Your girlfriend mentioning you to her mom is not small talk. Your coworker asking you to their best friend's birthday is not just filling a seat. Your new friend insisting you meet their college roommate because you two would actually get along is them telling you, "I see a future here, and I want my people to know you." When someone introduces you around, they are vouching. They are saying, with their choice, with their insistence, that you are worth the awkwardness of merging worlds. And they know the stakes. They know their people will ask questions, form opinions, maybe give feedback later, so they do it anyway. The opposite is equally loud. The person who never mentions you to anyone close to them, who keeps you cordoned off, who changes the subject when family comes up, that person is keeping an exit door open. Not always maliciously. Sometimes it is fear, sometimes it is timing, but it is still a kind of distance. Pay attention to the rhythm. Are they gradually weaving you in? Do they light up when talking about you to others? Or do they seem apologetic, like they are making an excuse? Do they actively pull you toward their people? Or do you have to ask to meet them? Do they brag about you? Or just mention you in passing? The tiny behavior here is the texture of the introduction itself. How eager they sound, how often it happens, whether they seem proud. Are you being shown off or fitted in? There is a difference, and you can feel it. Preferred walking side consistency. Walk with someone you care about and watch which side they choose. Then notice whether they choose the same side next time and the time after that. Your brain is doing something it does to everyone, slotting people into patterns without asking permission. If someone consistently walks on your left, keeps a hand on your left shoulder, leans into your left side during conversations, their nervous system has decided you are safe enough to claim a territory. They're not thinking about it. That's precisely why it tells you something true. Flip the script with someone who orbits you instead, never settling into a fixed position, always repositioning, never quite anchoring to one side. That person is either anxious around you and stays mobile as a way to manage that tension, or they're keeping their options open, staying fluid. Neither is malicious, but the data reads differently. The person who walks slightly ahead, angling their body toward whatever's coming rather than toward you, is managing their own internal rhythm and letting you follow if you choose. But the person who mirrors your walking speed, adjusts their stride to match yours, softens their pace when you slow down, they're in sync with you. They're paying attention to your cadence as a form of care. Some people will shift which side they walk on, depending on whether you're holding something, whether there's traffic, whether the pavement is uneven. That flexibility is its own signal. They're constantly tracking your comfort without making you ask. The trick is watching patterns across multiple walks, not just one. Does the pattern hold? Do they default back to the same side even when circumstances change? If someone keeps drifting to your right side over weeks and months, their body is telling you something their words might not say yet. The walking side is one of the first places the body betrays what the voice is still negotiating. Pay attention to whether they return. Walking pace, matching yours. Next time you're walking with someone you care about, forget their face for a moment and watch your feet instead. Notice whether they're naturally keeping rhythm with you or whether they're constantly adjusting. Speeding up when you rush, falling back when you slow down. It's almost invisible, which is exactly why it matters so much. Your body has its own tempo, built from 1,000 small habits accumulated over years. And when someone genuinely wants to stay with you, literally and metaphorically, they sync to it without thinking, without checking their watch, without that quiet sigh of effort. They're just matching your stride like it's the obvious, natural thing to do. The reverse is equally telling. If someone is always slightly ahead, always creating that small gap between you, always walking like they're on their own timeline with you somewhere in the general vicinity, your nervous system probably already knows what that means. You feel it as a tiny rejection with every step, a small sting you might not have words for. The real tell is that this happens below the level of performance and choice. You cannot fake walking pace matching for very long because your body gets tired of maintaining someone else's rhythm when it doesn't genuinely want to. The effort becomes visible after a while, the micro slowdown, the quick catch-up, the telltale strain. Someone who does it consistently, on the 5th walk or the 50th, is telling you something true with their feet. They are choosing, over and over, to move at your speed, not because they have to, or even because they're aware they're doing it, but because the pull toward you is strong enough that their body follows without permission from their thinking mind. Watch it this week. Pay attention to how many people match you and how many are always slightly out of sync, always moving to their own hidden clock. Your gut will recognize the difference immediately, and you'll stop wondering what it all means. Waiting at the top of the stairs. Your key slides into the lock. 2 seconds pass. They appear at the top of the stairs, not calling down, not texting, just standing there, waiting. Most people miss this entirely, but it cuts straight through every excuse and lands at the truth of how someone prioritizes you. Someone who genuinely looks forward to seeing you doesn't stay buried in what they're doing when they sense you're about to walk through the door. Their attention diverts, their body moves toward the possibility of you, and they position themselves in a place where you'll see them first, where the greeting doesn't require extra effort or shouting. It's already happening before words even arrive. This isn't about grand gestures or carefully planned declarations. It's about the automatic impulse that bypasses all thinking. When people truly value someone, they meet them halfway without consulting themselves first. They don't wait to be summoned. They don't finish their sentence, close their laptop, and then slowly make their way down like they've been interrupted. The waiting at the top of the stairs says, "I was listening for you. I wanted to see your face when you arrived. I prioritized the moment you walked in over the comfort of staying exactly where I was. Now, the inverse matters equally and tells an equally clear story. Someone who stays in their room, who doesn't appear, who waits to be found or dragged out. They're speaking fluently too, just in a language made of absence. Indifference has a physical signature that shows up in doorways and hallways and quiet moments you thought nobody was watching. So start paying attention to small entrances and exits in your life, the moments nobody performs for and nobody rehearses. Who moves toward you without being asked? Who positions themselves to see you first? Who meets you at the threshold instead of waiting to be discovered? These tiny repositionings are how affection actually looks when stripped of performance and exposed to air. The body doesn't lie about priority. It's incapable of it, and it never will be. Doorway lingering at goodbye. Your hand hits the doorframe. Okay, I should go, you say. Then you both just stand there. They could step back inside. They could wave and close the door. Instead, they're asking one more question, or touching your arm again, or walking you to the car when a porch wave would have done it. That threshold moment, that's not politeness anymore. That's information written in real time. When someone genuinely wants you gone, the goodbye lands clean and fast, like a door closing on a conversation that's already over in their mind. But lingering means part of them isn't ready to release you back into the world. It's the small mechanical things that add up. Manufacturing reasons to extend the moment, asking something they could text, finding one more topic before you actually leave. You'll see it in people who aren't trying to impress you anymore, who don't perform the quick exit choreography. Some of this is just chattiness or comfort, true, but there's a specific texture to it when someone is actively delaying. They're still in the moment with you when they could easily be elsewhere. People who are truly ambivalent don't linger. They're already thinking about what comes next, already mentally in the house. They don't invent reasons to keep you standing there, but someone hesitating at the threshold, someone who keeps finding one more thing to say, they're voting with their body that they want you around. It doesn't always mean deep love or best friendship material. You've known acquaintances who linger, distant family members not ready to face solitude, even people you barely connect with who just aren't finished yet. But lingering is evidence of investment, a small reluctance to collapse the goodbye into "see you later." That micro delay at the door, that tiny gravity pulling them toward one more moment. It's their nervous system saying yes to your presence when they could easily say no. The next time you catch yourself dawdling at someone's door, or notice them dawdling at yours, don't brush past it. That pause is them saying it without words. I'm not quite done with you yet. Touch initiation and duration. A hand reaches to your shoulder at the bar. A finger brushes your arm mid-conversation. A palm lands on your back. Watch those moments before you listen to the words that follow. That first touch is almost never accidental, and the seconds it lingers tell you what their voice might still be rehearsing. Touch is the oldest language we have, older than speech, and it moves through your body before your brain even registers it happened. When someone genuinely likes you, they initiate contact the way you'd touch something warm. Naturally, without the lag of calculation, without checking whether it's socially acceptable first. That grab and release is one message entirely. A hand that stays for 2 extra seconds while they're listening to you speak is another world. The duration is where the truth lives, because hands don't lie the way words do. People uncomfortable around you tend to keep their hands folded or pinned to their own body unless a social script forces them to reach out. A handshake that melts into a real grip instead of a quick release. A hug that doesn't end the moment politeness allows. An elbow touch that feels protective rather than transactional. These are tiny translations of what someone's nervous system feels about you. Now flip it. The flinch, when you move closer, arms crossing the moment you sit down, the step backward, when you step forward. Touch avoidance isn't shyness, it's a statement, and sometimes that statement means hurt, sometimes distance, sometimes a boundary you didn't know you'd crossed. Pay close attention to whether someone touches you the way they touch others, or whether you get a different texture, more frequent warmth, or a notable cold. Your body recognizes the difference before your mind can name it, and that recognition is where the real answer hides. Pat versus grip in the hug. A hug is never just a hug. The hands are doing reconnaissance. Most of us miss this entirely because we're wrapped up in the warmth or counting the seconds, but the actual story lives in what those hands do next. Some people pat your back in a hug, rhythmic and light, like they're comforting a child who scraped their knee or saying goodbye to a coworker on the last day before a transfer. The pat is a fence. It's a tiny clock running down. I acknowledge this moment, and now it ends. Other people grip. Their hands don't bounce or retreat. They press. They stay. There's no countdown embedded in their fingers. The difference is stark because it reveals whether someone is actually hugging you or just performing the shape of one. The pat is the social version, the one that fits the script everyone learns. You pat your boss, your ex, your neighbor, people you're supposed to feel something toward but haven't quite figured out yet. The grip belongs to a different category entirely. It's what happens when someone is genuinely relieved you exist in the same room. A parent gripping their kid after a long shift. A friend holding someone who just got terrible news. A partner pulling you in after weeks away. The grip has no timer running. The hand stays committed. Here's the slippery part. People can fake a pat convincingly, and they absolutely do. So if someone pats you every single time, even in situations where a grip would naturally fit, you're receiving a quiet message that they're uncomfortable going too deep. Not because they hate you, but because there's something in the way. Habit, distance, old hurt, or just a nervous system that never learned to hold on. The next time you hug someone you actually want to feel present with, try gripping instead of patting. Stay longer. Let your hands press a little deeper. Notice if they press back. That small shift in your own touch sometimes pulls something honest out of them. Withdrawing the hand first. You're holding hands with someone, and there's that moment, a few seconds in, where you feel their grip soften. Not dramatically, just a tiny loosening of pressure. Then their hand slides away, and they're the one who let go first. It's such a small thing that most people miss it entirely, but your nervous system catches it immediately. That pullback is worth listening to. Hand contact is one of the most vulnerable things two people do in public. It's a choice to stay connected, and when someone withdraws first, even gently, they're often signaling something their words haven't caught up to yet. Maybe they're unsure, maybe they're feeling crowded or distant. Maybe something just shifted in how safe they feel with you. The tricky part is that people almost never withdraw because they hate you. They withdraw because they're uncomfortable with how much they feel, or they've suddenly remembered a reason to protect themselves, or they're testing whether you'll reach back. If someone consistently lets go first, at the car door, in the movie theater, walking home, you're watching them rehearse disengagement. They're rehearsing a kind of softness that comes before the real goodbye. This doesn't mean the relationship is doomed. It means something genuine is bothering them, and they haven't found the words yet. Some people withdraw because they're afraid of looking too attached in front of others. Some do it because being touched reminds them they could lose you, and that fear is too sharp. The move here isn't to grip tighter or make it weird by calling it out. Instead, notice the pattern. Does it happen only at certain times? Only around other people? Only when you bring up something real? That's your map. Once you know where the withdrawal happens, you know where the real conversation needs to happen. Not about hands, but about whatever made them need to pull back in the first place. That willingness to notice without judgment is what turns a tiny gesture into actual understanding. Mirroring your posture shift. Lean back in your chair during a conversation and watch what happens next. If someone genuinely cares about maintaining connection with you, their body will often follow yours. Not obviously, not in a way they're conscious of, but like a subtle echo. You shift your weight, they shift theirs. You cross your arms, they cross theirs a beat later. You angle toward them, they angle back. This isn't manipulation, it's attunement. The brain of someone who is tracking you, present with you, syncing to your wavelength, naturally falls into this rhythm. It's what therapists call rapport, but really it's just the nervous system saying yes to someone. The thing that cuts through all the noise. And why this matters when you're trying to figure out who's actually there versus who's just going through the motions is that people rarely mirror those they don't care about or don't respect. You can sit in the same coffee shop with someone totally indifferent to you, and they won't track a single shift. Their body stays its own island, untouched by yours. But someone who is actually invested, their nervous system becomes like a tuning fork to yours. They're not thinking about it. That's the whole point. If someone is working hard to mirror you because they read a book on persuasion, you'll feel the effortfulness immediately. It'll be just a shade off, like an actor playing a role instead of living it. Real mirroring has no lag, no calculation, no visible seams. It just happens naturally, the way breathing happens when you stop paying attention to it. The signal lives in the unconscious, in timing, in ease, in the absence of strain. So the next time you're with someone you're trying to read, make a small, deliberate movement. Uncross your legs, tilt your head, sit up straighter, lean forward, and give it 5 seconds of silence, not to test them cruelly, but to notice who is still in the room with you and who has already checked out. Mirror, lag after a beat. Watch what happens the moment someone sees you. Their face should light up like you just turned on a switch, but sometimes there's a skip in the film first. That tiny pause, that almost imperceptible stutter before the smile arrives, is your nervous system reading theirs. Genuine warmth doesn't wait for permission. It shows up as a reflex, a laugh that bounces back the same second yours leaves your mouth, a lean forward that tracks your lean forward, shoulders that drop the instant they catch sight of you. These things happen before the brain catches up, in that split-second space where calculation hasn't arrived yet. But when there's hesitation, when the response takes a beat to assemble, something different is happening. They're choosing. Maybe they're checking whether you're worth the effort. Maybe they're tired and have to manufacture the reaction rather than feel it. Maybe they're naturally guarded with everyone. Maybe they're distracted. The lag itself isn't a verdict. It's just a signal that some part of them is still deciding. The honest muscle of connection is reflex, not performance. A real laugh happens to you. A polite laugh you execute. Real comfort shows up as the body forgetting to guard itself. When someone genuinely feels safe around you, they don't think about their response. It just spills out. The face moves before conscious thought can edit it. The shoulders soften without permission. So the next time you're with someone and you catch that pause, that delay before they mirror your energy, let it land without turning it into a story. Don't make it absolute, but do let it teach you something. The people who truly matter to you will forget to pretend, and you'll recognize them by how fast their whole body says yes to you. Reflex, not effort. That's where the real answer lives. Breath synchrony while seated. Sit across from someone you care about for long enough and something strange happens. Your breathing starts to mirror theirs. Not because you're conscious of it, not because you read an article. It just does. This is breath synchrony, and your nervous system sends it out before your brain even knows it's interested. When two people genuinely connect, their chest rises and falls in near unison. The rhythm becomes shared. It sounds mystical until you realize what it means. Your body is telling the truth your mouth might hide. Breath is the one thing we can't really fake for long. You can fake a smile. You can fake attention. You can even fake a laugh that lands just right. But you can't hold false breathing for 20 minutes without it feeling like you're drowning. So, if someone sits with you and their breath stays shallow, hurried, or deliberately separate from yours, your body knows something is off. Even if you haven't named it yet, the person who feels safe with you will fall into your tempo without trying. They'll slow down if you're calm. They'll speed up if you're animated. They're not thinking about it. That's the point. It's autonomic honesty at work, the kind of truth-telling that happens below the level of strategy. You've probably felt this without language for it. That person who makes you feel instantly settled, like you can finally exhale. Or the one who leaves you jangled no matter what they say or how well they're performing. Their nervous system is literally telling you whether they trust the room you're both in, whether they're genuinely at ease, or running a low hum of alertness. The trick is learning to notice it. Let your awareness drop below conversation for a moment and just observe what's happening in the body. Does their breathing match the mood they're claiming? If someone says they're fine while their breath is held tight or moving fast, believe the breath. It never learned to lie. Matching your speech tempo. You walk into a coffee shop and order slowly, taking pauses between words because you're tired, or thinking, or just not in a rush. The barista mirrors you back without thinking, their voice settling into your rhythm. Then a friend bursts in and speaks at machine gun speed, excited about their weekend plans, and watch what happens. The barista doesn't slow down for you again until your friend leaves. They match the most recent person's rhythm the way our nervous systems do when we're genuinely attentive to someone. Speech tempo is one of those invisible handshakes that happens below awareness. A small, "yes, I am here," that comes from actual tracking. It's not something you consciously decide. It's your brain syncing to another brain. When someone never matches your pace, not once, not ever, it's quieter than a blunt rejection, but sometimes cuts deeper. Think of the person who lets you finish sentences at your own rhythm, who doesn't interrupt before your thought lands, who gives you the space your voice needs, versus the one who keeps their pace locked in stone no matter how you shift. That's not simple rudeness. It's a form of deafness. They're not syncing to you because they're not listening for you. They're waiting for their turn, or proving their point moves faster than yours, or caught in their own world. The inverse tells a different story. Someone who slows down when you're struggling, who speeds up when you're excited, who meets you where your voice actually lives instead of making you chase theirs or wait for you to catch up. That's attunement. That's a small door opening. Pay attention to this the next time you're stressed or working through something hard. Does the person speed up, drag you along at their pace, or do they actually hear where your rhythm is and move with it? That tiny match or mismatch tells you whether they see you as a person they're talking with or just a person they're talking at. The tempo never lies. Voice pitch rise at your name. There's a moment in almost every conversation where someone says your name and something shifts in the air. Their voice gets lighter, almost brighter, like they've just plugged into energy they weren't using a second before. You might not consciously hear it, but your nervous system does. Your larynx does something strange when you say the name of someone you like. It tilts upward, almost involuntarily, because dopamine is flooding your system, and your body has no choice but to respond. It's the same reason a dog's ears perk at a car key. You don't decide to do this. The pitch rise is so fast and so automatic that most people never catch it. Neither the person doing it, nor the person hearing it, consciously registering the shift. But it happens in conversation when you walk into a room, in texts read aloud, in voicemails, in casual group chats. Everywhere. That tiny acoustic signal is your brain detecting a change in their baseline, and pitch rise signals arousal in the psychological sense, activation, engagement, the feeling that something good just arrived. The inverse matters just as much. When someone's voice stays flat or drops slightly at your name, when they sound bored or neutral delivering those syllables, you feel it too, even if you blame yourself or convince yourself you're reading too much into a tone. You're not. Humans are exquisitely sensitive to vocal prosody, the music underneath words. A therapist will tell you that someone who loves you will light up when they say your name, not all the time and not performatively, but often enough that you notice. The trap is assuming one flat day means everything has changed. It doesn't. But a pattern of that lifted, open pitch across weeks and months, that's someone's body saying what their mouth might not admit yet. That hearing your name feels like good news to them, like you're the car key, and they just heard the jingle. Vocabulary borrowing from you. Watch what happens the next time you say something specific. A word, a phrase, a particular way of describing annoyance. You say, absolutely catastrophic about a minor inconvenience, and 6 weeks later, you hear them dropping that same phrase into a conversation with someone else. Or you've got a signature laugh, that little snort thing, and suddenly they're doing it too. Even when you're nowhere near. It's not mimicry born from mockery. It's the opposite of that entirely. When people genuinely care about you, they unconsciously absorb the texture of how you sound. Your vocabulary becomes so familiar, it stops feeling like someone else's words and starts feeling like home. It's what happens over years with long-term partners. They don't start dressing the same or talking the same on purpose, but they do it anyway because they've been breathing the same emotional air. Here's where most people miss the real signal. Not everyone does this with everyone. Your colleague who tolerates you, probably not borrowing your catchphrases. Your closest friend, the one who lights up when your name appears on their screen, you'll catch them using your exact words in conversations you're not even part of. The mechanism is quieter than conscious choice. Words are identity. When someone adopts your vocabulary, they're not just saying, I like you. They're admitting something less guarded. I want to think like you. I want to sound like you. I want to move through the world a little bit more the way you do. It lands differently than a compliment because it's been happening in the background, outside of deliberate decision. The real tell is consistency and reach. Do they borrow from you in moments when you're nowhere near to impress, when there's no audience but strangers? That's the mark. So next time you hear someone use your exact phrasing, don't brush past it. Notice who's borrowing from you and who isn't. That asymmetry, that imbalance, often tells you the whole story about where you actually stand in someone's world. Adopting your inside jokes. You make a weird reference that only makes sense to you two. Something absurd from last week. A a dumb thing you said wrong, a private laugh nobody else would get. Then, weeks later, you hear them use it with their own friends, completely naturally, as if they weren't borrowing your humor, but claiming it as their own. That moment, small as it is, tells you they've woven you into their actual life, not just the part they show you. Inside jokes are currency in real friendships. They mark territory and say, this person matters enough that I think about our time together when they're not around, and I want to bring them into new conversations. When someone doesn't adopt your jokes, it doesn't mean they don't like you, but it often means you exist in a box labeled this person, not as a texture that runs through their whole week. The people who steal your language are the ones replaying moments with you, building something. They're not just laughing at the joke, they're laughing at the memory of you laughing, and they want others to know that you and they share something. There's also a small risk involved in it. Using someone's inside joke outside that circle means you might get a blank stare, have to explain it, or feel foolish, so when someone does it anyway, especially if they do it often and unself-consciously, they're voting for you, saying you matter enough to look a little odd for. Pay attention to which of your jokes land and stick with people, because the ones who let your weird become part of their weird are keeping you close, while the ones who smile and move on are being kind, but staying at arm's length. Neither is wrong, but one tells you something real about where you actually sit in their life, and whether you're woven into the fabric of their days or kept at a comfortable distance. Pronoun shift to we. Someone cancels plans with you and says, I need to stay in tonight, then later texts a friend, we're thinking about ordering pizza. Or a co-worker goes from, I'm working on this project, to, we should probably figure this out, the moment you join the conversation. Language doesn't shift randomly. Pronouns are a map of how someone's mind is drawing the circle of inclusion, and you can feel the exact moment you move inside it or get pushed out. When someone genuinely sees you as part of their world, not just passing through it, the grammar changes. They stop narrating their life to you and start narrating it with you. You become a we instead of an audience. This matters because it's not a conscious choice most people make. Someone doesn't sit down and think, today, I will integrate pronouns to signal deeper attachment. It leaks out. A person moving from my weekend to our weekend is showing you that they've started organizing their time around the assumption you're in it. Conversely, when someone keeps saying I, even in moments where we would fit naturally, I went to that restaurant you suggested, I really liked it, instead of we should go back sometime, they're telling you something quieter. They're keeping you at a comfortable distance. The stakes feel small because pronouns are small, but that's exactly why they work as truth tellers. Your conscious mind isn't guarding them. Someone can lie with words, but the pronoun shift usually catches the truth before the mouth does. Listen for the moment the language changes. Don't make it mean more than it does. One, we, doesn't promise forever, but notice what happens over time. When someone starts planning future tense with you in the room, when possessives blur between theirs and yours, when they narrate problems as ours without hesitation, when they slip and say, we could, instead of you could, they're not doing it by accident. That's a small door opening, and doors like that tell stories your ears were waiting to hear. Naming you in stories. Pay attention to what happens when someone you care about tells a story to a group. Do they say, my friend did this? Or do they say, Sarah did this? That small choice, your actual name versus a placeholder, tells you something real about the mental real estate you occupy. When people name you in their narratives, they are claiming you. They are marking you as distinct and worth the specificity. A person who genuinely values you doesn't blur you into someone I know or this girl I was talking to. You become a character with a name, a texture, a presence that matters enough to be precise. And here is what makes this sticky. They do it without thinking. It is not calculated. Someone who loves you will naturally reach for your name the way they reach for the names of people in their closest orbit. They do not have to pause and decide. You are vivid enough to them that your name comes first. Conversely, notice who tells stories about their time with you but never quite says your name aloud, who defaults to we, they, the group. That distance is real. It might mean you are interchangeable to them, or that you are not quite stable enough in their life to warrant that level of personal claiming. But here is the gentler truth too. Sometimes people withhold names because they are nervous, because they fear saying your name out loud makes something too real or too tender. Context matters. A nervous crush might fumble your name in a story because naming you feels like declaring something. So listen for the pattern, not the single moment. Does the person habitually reach for your name when they talk about shared moments, or does your presence stay background, unnamed? The ones who name you are the ones who have you filed in their mind as someone who exists separately from them, someone whose presence shaped the story. That is the kind of belonging worth noticing. Dropping your name to others, there's a conversation happening without you in the room and someone just casually mentioned you to a third party. Not because they had to, but because you came to mind. That small mention, that voluntary name drop, is pure, unfiltered honesty about who takes up space in someone's head. People talk about people they think about. They mention people they're proud to know. A colleague who genuinely respects you will introduce your idea in a meeting and credit you by name, not hoard the insight for themselves. A friend who values you will tell someone else about something you did or said, not as gossip, but as proof that you matter enough to share. Notice the difference between someone who name drops you to elevate themselves, "I know so-and-so," versus someone who brings you into a conversation because the topic naturally connects to you, or because they want others to understand something about your work or who you are. The texture is completely different. One is transactional leverage. The other is genuine advocacy. If someone rarely mentions you to others, rarely brings you up in conversation, rarely seems to include you in the wider circles of their life, that silence is also information. It's not always rejection. Sometimes it's compartmentalization or caution or simple indifference. But if someone mentions you across different contexts, to work friends, to family, to new people they meet, to acquaintances, there's a quiet trust happening. They're comfortable associating you with themselves. They're willing to let you exist in their world beyond the private moment you two share. The consistency matters more than the frequency. Pay close attention, not just to whether someone drops your name, but the tone and context surrounding it. Is it protective, proud, casual, reluctant, embarrassed? The way they say your name to others when you're not there to hear it, in the spaces where they have no performance reason to be kind or careful, might be the most honest thing they'll ever tell you about how they actually see you. Reference to a shared future. Listen for the grammar. When someone says, "when we," instead of "if we," that tiny word swap tells you more than 1,000 declarations ever could. You mention a concert next month, and they're already saying, "Oh, we should go to that together." Or you float a road trip idea, and they're picturing themselves in the passenger seat before you even finish talking. That's not casual conversation. That's someone building scaffolding in their mind, constructing an actual timeline where you're woven in. People who are ambivalent, people who are quietly plotting their exit, or keeping you at arm's length, they don't do this. They stay buttoned up in the safe language of, "maybe someday," or "that sounds fun," without ever stitching themselves into the real picture. But watch what happens with someone who genuinely values you. They talk about next summer like you're already part of it. They mention a restaurant and say, "You'd love this place." They joke about inside jokes you'll have 5 years from now, completely unself-conscious about it. They're not performing kindness. They're literally making room for you in their future. And that requires a baseline belief that the future actually includes you. The inverse is just as loud. If someone never references a shared tomorrow, never naturally says, "when we," never builds those small bridges forward, you're holding crucial information, even if it stings. It's rarely cruelty. It's someone keeping their emotional options open, hedging their actual bets, holding the long view at a distance. They might care about you right now, genuinely and warmly, but they're not letting that present moment connection extend into next year. So the next time someone mentions something months away, and your name just slides into it naturally, that's not small at all. That's them voting with their imagination. That's them telling you, without needing words, that they imagine a world where you're both still there. The silence when the future comes up. The careful, non-committal language when timelines get mentioned, the way they avoid planting you anywhere permanent, that's the real tell every time. Calendar volunteering for you. You mention you need help moving next Saturday, and watch what happens in the silence after. The person who actually cares doesn't say, "let me check my calendar." They say it while already reaching for their phone, already scanning, already mentally rearranging. No hesitation. No, "I'll get back to you." They are live checking because losing that slot matters less than holding the one with you. Most people treat their calendar like a fortress. They guard it, ration their time, negotiate every commitment. But when someone volunteers a chunk of their Saturday without friction, without the ritual back and forth of, "Are you sure? I don't want to be a burden," they are telling you something their words never will. They're telling you that you slot into their real life, not your leftover energy life, not the time they have after everything else. Calendar space is proximity, and proximity is a choice. Think about the difference between someone who says, "Yeah, I can probably swing by," and someone who pulls up their calendar and literally deletes something to make room. Not because they're desperate to impress, but because the shape of their week, without you in it, looks wrong to them now. That's not obligation, that's not duty calling, that's preference wearing a practical disguise. Here's what makes this behavior so revealing. Notice when someone makes calendar space for you, repeatedly. Not once, not for the big dramatic gesture, but the Tuesday afternoon, the random Thursday, the morning you didn't even expect to ask. Those are the moments when you stop being an option and start being a standing appointment in their mental life. They've begun organizing around you without announcement, without needing you to notice. The calendar doesn't lie because it costs real time, and time is the only resource nobody can fake having more of. If you're the one doing the rearranging, check yourself too. Because what you volunteer for reveals who you've already decided matters, and that decision usually lands before you're conscious of making it. Unprompted logistical help. You mention in passing that you're dreading a move next month. 3 days later, your person texts you a link to a truck rental place they found, with a note about weekend rates. They didn't wait for you to ask. They didn't do it for credit or a thank you. They just thought about your problem when you weren't in the room. That's the real tell. Logistical help, the kind that requires no audience, no emotional payoff, is what people do when they're genuinely invested in your life being easier. It's different from emotional support, which feels good to give. Moving a couch makes you sweaty and sore. Nobody does that for show. When someone volunteers to pick you up from the airport without being asked, or remembers you mentioned needing a plumber and sends you a referral weeks later, or quietly handles some annoying thing you were dreading, they're saying with their actions that they think about you when you're not performing, when nobody's watching. We live in an age of grand gestures and public declarations, but logistics are the unsexy backbone of real care. The person who shows up with coffee before your job interview, who figures out your parking situation, who texts you the address of the dermatologist you mentioned once because they know you're overwhelmed, who handles the small friction before you even fully realize it's there. They're not getting relationship points or applause, but here's what they're actually revealing. They've built a little internal model of your life and your stress, and they care enough to make one thing easier without needing you to ask, to thank them, or to even know it was them who did it. Watch for this in people. Not the big romantic moments or the Instagram-worthy favors, but the small frictions they quietly dissolve from your day. That's where the truth lives, in the unglamorous space between knowing someone's struggle and moving before they have to say the words out loud. Remembering trivial details. Someone texts you 3 weeks later, "How did that dentist appointment go?" Or, "Did your sister end up liking the job?" You mentioned it once, maybe in passing, maybe while walking to your car. Most people forget. This person didn't. That's not a small thing. It's a map of their interior life, and you're on it. When someone holds on to the small stuff about you, they're not doing it consciously, not performing it. They're doing it because you occupy real space in their mind, the kind of space that stays lit when you leave the room. They're thinking about you when you're not there, which is precisely what actual care looks like when it's not dressed up in grand gestures or Instagram moments. The inverse is worth sitting with too. If someone asks you the same question twice, or forgets a detail you've mentioned multiple times, or just goes blank when you reference something important to you, they're not being cruel necessarily. They're just not carrying you with them in the way you're carrying them. And that gap, that asymmetry, is information. It doesn't mean they don't like you. It means the bandwidth is different, and bandwidth is honest. Notice what someone chooses to remember. Is it your birthday, or your favorite coffee order, or that thing your kid is struggling with at school? Is it the embarrassing story you told them once, or the dream you're actually working toward? The details someone retains reveal their angle on you, whether you're a peripheral character in their story or something closer to central. When you next find yourself remembered for something small and forgotten by someone else, don't let it slide past. That's not about manners or effort or being thoughtful. That's about real estate in someone's attention. And real estate costs something. Someone who keeps the trivial facts of your life nearby is someone whose doors you're probably already inside of, and that's worth knowing. Recalling your food dislikes. At dinner, watch what happens when someone orders without asking, or when they build a meal around what you actually want. A person who remembers that you hate mushrooms, or that cilantro tastes like soap to you, or that you can't eat shellfish, is holding a detail about your life that has zero benefit to them. It doesn't make them smarter, funnier, or more successful. It just lives in their head because you matter enough to occupy rent-free space. The flip side lands harder when someone forgets or ignores what you've mentioned, especially after telling them more than once. It usually means you didn't lodge yourself deeply in their attention. They were listening with half an ear, the way you half listen to a podcast while scrolling. Food preferences are small. Nobody's life depends on remembering whether you're allergic to shellfish or just don't like the texture. That's precisely why they reveal everything. Preferences are too minor to force memory, so if someone keeps offering you the thing you can't eat or orders it for the table, knowing you won't touch it, they're showing you that your stated boundary didn't stick. Sometimes that's just distraction, a blank spot in the day. Sometimes it's quieter than that, a sign they're not really thinking about your world when you're not in the room, not imagining what you need. The people who nail this aren't trying. They're not writing lists or asking you to repeat yourself 3 times like you're a kid. They heard it once, maybe twice, and it stayed without strain. That's what real attention looks like. Not performance, not effort, just you mattering enough to stick in their mental landscape. Watch who remembers without being reminded, and who needs the same thing, explained every single time. The difference between someone who actually sees you and someone who's just running through the motions of politeness will become impossible to unsee once you start paying attention to this one small, ordinary thing. Asking a second question. There's a moment in every conversation where someone either leans in or checks out, and it usually happens right after you finish speaking. You tell them something, maybe about a project that fell apart, or a trip you're planning, or something that made you laugh, and then comes the fork in the road. They can do what most people do, offer a surface-level response and move on, or they can ask you another question. That second question is the invisible handshake that says they actually want to know more. Not because they're being polite, because they're curious about you specifically. Think about the last time someone surprised you by asking a follow-up. They didn't just say, "Oh, that sounds interesting." They asked, "What happened next?" or "How you felt about it?" or "Why you made that choice." That momentum into deeper territory, that's not accident. People who ask a second question are people who are still leaning toward you. They haven't mentally left the conversation yet. Contrast that with the person who gives you a well-timed compliment and then pivots hard to their own story, or who listens with the energy of someone waiting for their turn. Not cruel, just absent. The weird part is how much we notice this subconsciously and how little we admit it. You walk away from coffee feeling either seen or just heard, and the difference often boils down to whether they asked one question or 2. Watch closely next time. Does the follow-up come naturally, or does the conversation stall like a car running out of gas? Real interest doesn't play it safe. If someone keeps asking you questions, real ones, not just going through the motions, they're still building the bridge. They want the conversation to go somewhere. And if you find yourself being the only one asking, that's information too. It stings a little to name it, but it matters. Pay attention to who keeps reaching for more of you. Follow-up question depth. Think about the last time you told someone about something that mattered to you. A worry, a win, a shift in your life. Notice what they asked next. Did they dig, or did they nod and move on? The depth of follow-up questions is one of the quietest tells of genuine interest. Someone who actually cares doesn't just hear you. They want to understand the shape of what you're carrying. They ask about the part that seems small but matters. They circle back to something you mentioned 3 minutes ago. They ask, "What does that feel like?" instead of "What happened?" You've probably felt the difference in your body, that warm click when someone's question lands exactly where you needed to be heard, versus the flatness of, "Oh, cool," before they pivot to themselves. The tricky part is that most people are busy, distracted, running on fumes. So shallow questions don't always mean they don't care. Sometimes they just mean they're overwhelmed or their attention is fractured across too many things. But patterns don't lie. and they're what matter. If someone consistently asks you questions that move past the surface, about your thinking, your fears, the stuff that's actually hard, they're building a map of you. They're saying without words that you're worth the mental effort, that the real version of you matters more than the highlight reel. And the inverse is just as true. When someone asks nothing, or only the questions that let them talk about themselves next, you're getting information too. Not necessarily that they don't care about you as a person, but that you're not top of mind, that you're pleasant to be around when it's convenient, but not worth the cognitive lift of wondering what's really going on underneath. Pay attention the next time you're talking with someone who matters. Look at what they ask you, not what they say about what you said, but what they actually want to know. That question is the real answer, and it's been waiting in plain sight the whole time. Returning to your dropped thread, you mention something that matters to you in passing, a worry about work, a dream you're testing out loud, a small win you wanted to share. The other person nods, and the conversation rolls forward into something else. 2 weeks later, they bring it up unprompted. Hey, how did that thing go? That single sentence tells you something real. It means they were actually listening, not just waiting for their turn. It means your words didn't evaporate the moment you finished speaking. Most people let dropped threads stay dropped. There's no social penalty for forgetting. Nobody's keeping score. But the people who genuinely care tend to circle back. Not because they have perfect memory, but because they filed it away somewhere that mattered, and your life stayed on their radar. This is different from the person who remembers facts about you to seem engaged. This is someone who noticed what you cared about and held it long enough to ask. Pay attention to who does this with the small things, not the big announcements. The big stuff gets easy to remember, but someone who remembers the conversation where you mentioned your sister's health scare, or the project you weren't sure about, or the book you were thinking of reading, that person was actually present with you. They weren't performing attentiveness. When someone returns to your dropped thread, they usually do it with real curiosity or genuine follow-up, not a scripted check-in. They ask a specific question that shows they understood the weight of it, not just the fact of it. They don't say, "How's everything?" They say, "Did you end up taking that class?" That specificity proves the listening was real. Watch for this pattern across your life. Does someone bring your things back into the conversation unprompted? Do they remember what mattered to you well enough to ask a real question about it months later? That behavior, that quiet, unremarkable moment where they prove you weren't forgotten, is how you know you're actually being held in someone's mind. Conversational repair attempts. You say something that lands wrong. The air gets a little stiff, and then you watch to see if they lean back in or turn away. A person who cares will stop mid-stride and say it differently. Soften a word, ask what you meant, rewind, and try again. They will not let the awkwardness sit there like spoiled milk. Conversational repair is what happens when someone refuses to let a bad moment become the story of you. It is not an apology every time. Often it is smaller and stranger than that. They might repeat what you said with a gentler inflection. They might ask you to elaborate when you felt misunderstood. They might joke to cut the tension, but in a way that shows they are checking whether you are still there. Watch for the people who do this without fanfare. They do not make a show of fixing things. They just fix them, because leaving you standing and hurt is worse than the tiny friction of asking for a do-over. And watch, too, for the ones who don't. The ones who let a bad joke hang in the air, who say something sharp and sail past it without a glance back, who would rather be right than check if you are okay. That silence after a missed moment is its own answer. It tells you whether they see you as someone worth the small discomfort of repair. The truly indifferent do not bother to rebuild. The avoidant pretend nothing broke at all. But the people who care, who actually feel the small crack and reach for a way to seal it, those are the ones who notice you enough to know something went wrong in the first place. Listen, not for grand gestures of apology, but for the quiet rhythm of someone trying again. That willingness to restart mid-sentence, mid-thought, to meet you where the hurt lives. That is how you know you matter enough to get a second take, a softer landing. Interruption to add versus redirect. You're telling someone about a bad day at work, the frustration, the unfair feedback, the whole stupid situation, and they jump in mid-sentence. Here's where it gets telling. Do they interrupt to build on your point or to steer you somewhere else? The person who genuinely cares usually can't help themselves from adding to your story. "Oh man, and then what happened?" Or, "That's classic. My boss does the exact same thing, but here's what I realized works." They're adding texture, showing they're tracking your thread, rooting for the next chapter. Even when they share their own experience, it feels like they're sitting beside you, not replacing you. Then there's the redirect. Someone pulls the wheel mid-conversation. You're venting about a conflict, and suddenly they're telling you why you should just quit, move cities, or stop caring about it. Or worse, they change lanes entirely. Your story about something that hurt becomes their springboard to talk about themselves, their bigger problem, their solution. No building, no adding, just replacement. The redirect person is often solving, not witnessing. Sometimes that's kindness trying to look practical. Sometimes it's discomfort with your sadness, so they eject from it. And sometimes, the hardest one to name, it's just that they're not that invested in the actual you. They're invested in a version that needs fixing, or a story that's more interesting when it's theirs. The thing is, most of us do both in different moments. We're not pure adders or pure redirects. But watch which one shows up more when you're small, when you're struggling, when you need someone to just follow your lead. Pay attention to the pattern across a week, a month, a season. The person who leans in to add, they're making space for you to exist as you are. The person who redirects, they're already writing the ending. That habit will tell you far more about their real stance toward you than any promise they could make. Topic: hijack frequency. You're telling someone about your day, a small win at work, something that made you laugh, and halfway through, they steer it. Not a gentle redirect, a full pivot to themselves, their story, their problem. You finish your sentence in the air, they don't circle back, and you're left holding the feeling of being interrupted before you even got there. This matters more than it looks. When someone consistently pulls the conversation away from you and toward themselves, they're showing you something quiet but reliable. Your inner world doesn't land on their radar the way theirs does. It's not always malice. Sometimes it's anxiety. Their own stuff feels too big and urgent to sit with yours. Sometimes it's shallow interest dressed up as friendliness. But the pattern is the tell. People who genuinely care about you will notice when you're building to something. They'll let you finish. They'll ask follow-up questions that show they actually listened. They might share something of their own later, sure, but they don't steal the moment. They don't make your story the setup for theirs. Watch how often someone asks you to continue versus how often they use your words as a trampoline to bounce to themselves. Notice if they remember details from what you said last week, or if each conversation starts from zero because they weren't actually tracking. The hijack isn't always obvious. It can be wrapped in a laugh, "that reminds me," a seemingly innocent tangent. But when it happens every single time, when your voice is always the opening act and never the main event, you're looking at someone for whom you're a mirror, not a person. You're there to reflect their story back to them, not to have one of your own. If this person matters to you, try naming it gently once, not as accusation, but as an observation. Some people genuinely don't know they do it and will shift. Others will defend the habit. That answer, right there, is worth more than 100 conversations. Advice giving. Instead of listening, you tell someone about a problem, not asking for an answer, just needing to be heard. And before you finish the second sentence, they're already pivoting. Here's what you should do. I had the same thing happen, and here's how I fixed it. You know what your mistake was? The shift happens fast, and it leaves you feeling oddly smaller. What you're actually watching is someone solve you like a puzzle instead of staying with you in the mess. When someone truly cares about your inner life, they resist the urge to be the fixer. They sit in the uncomfort of your story without needing to sand it down into a lesson. They ask what you need, not what they think you're missing. Advice giving fast, before you've even landed on how you feel, is often a sign that the other person is uncomfortable. Not with you, but with being present without a job to do. It can also signal something quieter. They've already decided what your problem is, which means they're not really listening to what you're actually saying. They're listening to the version of your problem they imagined before you opened your mouth. That's the gap. A real listener stays curious, even when silence gets heavy. They hold space instead of filling it. And when they do offer something, it comes much later, and it comes sideways. A question that helps you find your own answer, not their answer handed to you pre-wrapped. Notice how you feel after you vent to someone. Do you feel met, or do you feel instructed? Do you feel like they trusted you to figure it out, or like they think you're broken? That feeling isn't random. It's data about whether this person sees you as someone worth understanding, or as someone who needs fixing. The quiet ones who can sit with your pain without rushing to cure it, those are the ones worth keeping close. The difference matters more than you think. Volunteering the vulnerable detail. Someone tells you they bombed the presentation. That alone is a fact. But then they add the thing they didn't have to say. They hadn't slept in 30 hours. Their kid was sick. They were terrified before walking in. They hand you the context that makes them human instead of just the failure. That extra layer, that's vulnerability. And it only happens when they trust you with the full picture of who they are. Think about the people in your life you barely know. With them, you get the headlines. The guy at work mentions a fight with his partner, but never the messy part. The part where he yelled about something petty, or where he knows he was wrong. The acquaintance who shares the good news, but never the doubt that came before it. Then there is someone else entirely. They tell you about the fear underneath. They mention the shame they felt. They say the thing that makes them look flawed, weak, or human. Most of us are careful about this. We curate. We control the story so people see us the way we want to be seen. But when someone keeps volunteering those soft moments with you, the doubt, the grief, the embarrassment, the small failure, they are telling you something louder than words. You feel safe. You feel like someone who will not weaponize their honesty later, who will not laugh or judge or spread it around like currency. They are betting that you will hold it gently. The flip side matters too. Notice who never gets vulnerable around you. Notice who keeps their edges clean, their stories polished, their failures distant. That distance says something as well. But the people who hand you their mess, the small shameful details, the things that don't fit the image, they are showing you their real calculation of trust. Pay attention to who does this with you and who doesn't. Those are the people who have already decided who you are. Reciprocity of disclosure depth. You tell someone something real, something that cost you a little vulnerability to say, and then you wait to see what they do with the space you just opened. Do they match it? Do they go deeper, or do they politely nod and pivot to surface talk? That gap tells you everything. When someone likes you, trusts you, wants to know you, they mirror the depth of what you've shared. They don't match surface-level chatter with their deepest fear. They don't respond to intimacy with small talk. Instead, there's a reciprocal rhythm. You go down 2 steps, they go down 2 steps with you. You share a doubt, they share a doubt back. Not to one-up you or perform vulnerability theater, but because something in them recognizes the risk you took and answers it with their own. The person who only receives your secrets but never cracks open their own is keeping you at a distance, no matter how warm they seem. They're saying, without words, that you're safe to talk to, but they're not quite safe with you. And the person who overshares on the first meeting, spilling things you didn't ask for, is also showing you something. They're either testing boundaries or they don't have any, neither of which feels like actual connection. Real reciprocity is subtle. It's not mechanical matching. It's a felt sense that when you step into deeper water, they step in with you, rather than staying on the shore calling encouragement. Watch especially in the early weeks, before people perform what they think you want to hear. If someone asks you follow-up questions about what you've disclosed, remembers the detail later, and slowly reveals pieces of themselves back, that's someone building real trust with you. If months go by and you still don't know much about them while they know your whole story, you're holding the relationship up alone. That imbalance doesn't feel like closeness. It feels like you're working. Silence that stays comfortable. You're sitting across from someone you care about, and neither of you is talking. 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and nothing in your body tightens. You don't reach for your phone. They don't look away. The quiet doesn't feel like a held breath or a test you're failing. It just feels like room enough for both of you to exist. That's rarer than you think, and it matters more than small talk ever will. Most people feel silence as pressure. There's an instinct to fill it, to prove you're still wanted, still interesting, still there. You've probably felt it yourself, that creeping anxiety when conversation stalls, that small voice asking, "Are they bored now? Do I need to try harder?" But when someone sits quiet with you and doesn't squirm, doesn't rush, doesn't turn their attention elsewhere, searching for an escape route, they're telling you something your nervous system recognizes before your brain catches up. They don't need you to perform. The absence of noise isn't an absence of connection. This shows up in small moments. You're both scrolling on your phones in the same room. They glance over at you, smile, and go back to their feed. No explanation needed. You're waiting for an order at a coffee shop, standing shoulder to shoulder, not saying a word, and they don't interpret your silence as coldness. They know the difference between being ignored and being genuinely together. It's the kind of people who can sit through an entire meal without talking much and still leave feeling closer, not farther apart. The strange part is how rare this feels. Comfort like this, actual, easy, untested silence, usually takes time to build, but when you find it, watch what happens to you. You stop reaching for filler words around them. You stop performing. You don't have to earn the next moment with noise. Your own nervous system settles because theirs already has, and that quiet mutual permission to just exist is one of the deepest signals someone can send. Filling silence with anxiety. You're sitting across from someone you care about, and there's a pause. Not awkward yet, just a natural breath in conversation. But then you notice they start talking faster, filling every gap, nervous laughter appearing where none was needed before, suddenly bringing up random topics, apologizing for nothing, checking their phone, adjusting their posture 3 times in a row. The silence itself isn't the problem. Their reaction to it is. When someone feels genuinely comfortable around you, quiet doesn't scare them. They can sit with you and let a thought float between you both without immediately scrambling to cover it up. But when someone is anxious in your presence, whether from attraction, shame, fear of judgment, or the weight of unspoken things, they treat silence like a failing grade. They become the narrator of every empty second, stuffing the space with words the way you'd stuff a hole in drywall. It's restless, it's protective, it's telling. This behavior isn't conscious most of the time. You won't catch them thinking, I must speak now to fill this void. Instead, their nervous system hijacks the moment. Their body interprets the quiet as a threat and reaches for the only tool available: noise. The discomfort travels through their whole frame. Fidgeting intensifies. Eye contact either drops or locks hard onto your face. Breathing becomes shallow and quick. So when you're trying to read how someone really feels, watch what they do when the talking stops. Do they lean back and breathe, or do they lean forward and scramble? Someone who feels safe with you doesn't need to perform during the pauses. Someone who doesn't, or someone who has something they're terrified to say, will use words like a shield, filling the empty space before it can tell you anything real. The next time you're with someone and a natural silence lands, notice where their eyes go, whether their hands find work to do, how quickly they interrupt the quiet. That discomfort with emptiness isn't about you being boring. It's a window into what they're feeling underneath. Duration of held eye contact. There's a moment in almost every conversation where you can feel the difference between being looked at and being seen. Your coworker asks how your weekend was, and their eyes drift to their phone before you finish the first sentence. Your partner tells you about their day and locks in. Steady, unhurried, like you're the only thing in the room. Same question asked, wildly different feelings behind the eyes. Eye contact duration is one of those tiny physical tells that your nervous system picks up on before your brain has words for it. When someone genuinely cares about what you're saying, their gaze tends to land and stay. Not staring, that's its own kind of uncomfortable, but a natural, relaxed hold that softens as you speak. Sustained eye contact signals trust, interest, maybe even affection. It's biological. When we're bored or distracted, our eyes break away. We're literally looking elsewhere for stimulation. The tricky part is that everyone has baseline differences. Some people grew up in cultures where direct eye contact feels aggressive or disrespectful. Some neurodivergent folks find extended eye contact genuinely painful. Anxiety can make even someone who cares deeply seem avoidant. Family conditioning and trauma matter too. Someone who learned to avoid eyes grew up in a home where being seen meant being hurt. So context matters, always. But if you're talking to someone who usually held your gaze easily, and now they're treating your face like it's suddenly invisible, that shift tells you something has changed in how they're relating to you. The flip side, someone who suddenly holds your eye contact longer than usual often means they're trying harder to connect, reassure you, or convince you of something. A quick flicker upward after 3 seconds, that's often self-consciousness or slight discomfort. Watch for the pattern over time, not a single moment. Your nervous system is already fluent in this language. It reads micro shifts in gaze the way other people read words. Trust that quiet knowing. Gaze break direction. Watch what happens the moment someone breaks eye contact with you. Not that they break it, but where their eyes travel. Down toward the floor feels like shame or guilt, like they're hiding something or wishing they weren't heard. Up and away, toward the ceiling or a corner, often signals defensiveness or they're mentally checking out of the conversation. But sideways, that's the one that matters most. Eyes that drift to the side, especially toward an escape route or a phone, suggest they're already leaving you in their mind, even if their body is still in the chair. Most people think eye contact is about confidence, but the truth is softer and stranger. The direction someone's gaze travels when the connection breaks reveals what they're feeling in that exact second, raw and unfiltered. A friend who looks down after you share something vulnerable might be absorbing it seriously, yes, but they might also be uncomfortable or protecting themselves from the intensity of the moment. A person who glances toward the door isn't necessarily rude. They might be anxious about time, or they're someone whose nervous system gets flooded by sustained attention and needs small relief. Here's where it gets nuanced. People who care about you often look down during emotional moments because they're overwhelmed by what you're saying, not because they don't care. It's not rejection, it's a sign they're feeling it too much. Meanwhile, someone emotionally absent might hold your gaze steadily the whole time and still be thinking about dinner or planning their exit. The direction matters more than the duration ever will. Next time someone looks away mid-sentence, notice where. If they keep drifting sideways toward distractions or exits, that's a signal worth hearing. It means their body is here, but their escape route is already lit up in their mind. If they're looking down, but their shoulders are relaxed and they're still speaking, they're likely present, but emotionally flooded. The gaze break isn't the problem. The pattern is: one glance sideways during a conversation. Neutral, 3 times in 5 minutes. That's a different story entirely. Your job isn't to shame them for it. It's to notice whether the direction of their eyes matches the presence of their words, because that gap tells you everything about where they really are. Triangular gaze across the face. Watch someone's eyes during a real conversation with you, not the polite kind where they're already thinking about their grocery list, but an actual moment where they're present and the air between you feels like it matters. If they like you, their gaze does something specific. It travels in a triangle: eyes, mouth, eyes again, then back. It's not random drifting or a flicker of distraction. It's a pattern so reliable that neuroscience calls it the intimate gaze triangle. And it happens most when someone finds you interesting, attractive, or trustworthy enough to actually study. Your eyes tell stories your words won't. Your mouth tells stories your eyes can't hide. Someone who keeps cycling through that triangle is building a mental map of you, not just letting your words wash over them like background noise. This is completely different from the professional gaze, the one people use in meetings where they lock onto your eyes or forehead like you're a PowerPoint presentation. That's respect, maybe, even competence, but not intimacy. And it's worlds apart from the avoidant gaze, where someone looks anywhere but your face, as if the conversation is happening behind you or somewhere they'd rather be. The triangular pattern also carries a small twist that matters. It intensifies right when someone is deciding whether to trust you or move closer. You might see it spike right before someone shares something vulnerable, or right before they ask for a favor. The reverse cuts deeper. If someone you care about used to make that triangle and stops, their interest has genuinely shifted, not because they're distracted by their phone or having a rough day, but because the unconscious decision to study your face has ended. They've stopped collecting the small details that make you real to them. Next time you're in a conversation that matters, notice if their eyes move across your face in that slow, deliberate triangle. It's not nothing. Looking away when you shine. You just landed the promotion. You're telling them at dinner, and the second the words leave your mouth, you watch their eyes flick toward the window, the menu, suddenly anywhere but at you. Not for a blink, but for a full breath. Maybe they recover with a "that's great," but the delay is there, hanging like a question mark between you. That sideways gaze, that momentary exit from your face in your moment, speaks louder than any forced smile ever could. Some people can't hold steady when someone else gets bright. It's not always conscious. Nobody's sitting there plotting how to hurt you with their eyeline. But our bodies know what our minds won't admit. When someone genuinely celebrates you, their eyes tend to stay. They lean in. They watch your face to catch all the details, the small joy, the relief. They want to witness it. The actual seeing of you matters to them. But when someone is caught between envy, insecurity, or dimly lit resentment, the body betrays them. The gaze wavers. They look away from the light the way you'd turn from something too bright. It's a micro deflection, a tiny flinch that says, "I can't quite hold space for this version of you right now." The subtle part is this: they might genuinely care about you. They might want good things for you in the abstract. They might even feel guilty about their hesitation. But in that specific moment, something in them couldn't match your moment's voltage. Not yet. Not while they're struggling themselves or nursing something quieter. You won't change that by pushing closer or demanding their eyes stay on you. That only deepens the flinch. What you can do is notice it without drama and let it tell you something true. This person's capacity for your joy has a ceiling right now, and that's a real limit worth knowing. That's information. Use it to calibrate how much space you give them in your brightness and where else you might shine instead. Checking the room mid-story. You're telling them about your week, something that mattered, something you needed to say, and halfway through, their eyes flick away. Not for a second, for 3. They scan the room like they're hunting for an exit, then snap back to your face with a small smile. That little glance is worth studying because it tells you what your conscious mind might want to ignore. When someone is genuinely held by what you're saying, their attention narrows completely. The room disappears. Their pupils don't drift sideways toward the door, or the other conversation, or the phone on the table. Their whole body leans in, or at least stays rooted and still. The checking the room glance, though, that's a different animal. It's a micro-escape, a tiny signal that something isn't landing. Sometimes it's boredom. They checked out mentally 2 minutes ago, but stayed in the chair because leaving would be rude. Sometimes it's anxiety. The intimacy makes them uncomfortable, and they needed a break from sustained eye contact the way you'd need air. Sometimes it's genuine distraction, a stray thought, a sound, nothing personal at all. The trap is assuming you know which one without asking. You don't. But here's what's reliable. When someone is transported by your story, they don't need to look elsewhere. They're not scanning for relief or rescue or a graceful exit. They're exactly where they want to be. Notice the difference between eyes that stay anchored to you because they're pulled inward and eyes that keep hunting the room like it's searching for somewhere more interesting to occupy. That second person might still care about you, might still love you, but in that moment, they're absent, and you deserve to feel that difference. It changes how you calibrate what you share, who you trust with the tender stuff, and how much of your emotional energy you pour into rooms where people are always looking toward the door. Watch check frequency. Someone glances at their phone or wrist during your conversation and your gut screams rejection. But hold that thought for a second. The real tell isn't whether they check, it's the rhythm of it. A person genuinely invested in what you're saying will glance at the time once, maybe twice, usually with that small flush of embarrassment when they realize they might be late somewhere else. It's barely conscious, but someone checked out. They check constantly, almost mechanically, like they're tapping an invisible escape button every few sentences. You can feel the pulse of their restlessness in it. One feels like a small leak, the other like they're actively counting down to freedom. Here's where most people stop reading and get it wrong, though. Context is sneaky. A therapist watching the clock is probably protecting session length, not deciding you're tedious. Someone in chronic pain might be tracking their own discomfort, not measuring your worth. A parent glancing up could be genuinely engaged while also monitoring school pickup time. A partner tired from a long day might be checking the hour, not from indifference, but because their battery is drained. So don't make the watch your whole prosecution. Instead, layer it with everything else. Are their eyes still landing on your face, or are they gazing into the middle distance between checks? Do they ask real follow-up questions, or just nod in neutral? Is their body leaning toward you despite the time checking, or already edging back? Does their voice still carry warmth, or has it flattened? The actual signal lives in the whole picture. The eye contact, the questions, the posture, the tone, all voting yes or no. While that wrist glance happens, you've probably known someone who was technically late and still completely present with you, and someone else with nothing on their calendar who was already miles away. The watch is just punctuation on a sentence you're already reading. Learn to read the full page. Phone touch during your story. You're mid-sentence, telling them about something that mattered to you that day, and their hand drifts to their phone. Maybe they don't pick it up. Maybe they do. Either way, you felt it. That small gravitational pull toward the rectangle in their pocket. The split second where their attention flickered somewhere else. It's not always rejection, and that's what makes it harder to read. Sometimes they're genuinely just antsy. Sometimes the phone is background noise to their brain. But sometimes it's a soft no. A way of saying, your story isn't quite enough to hold them. Not right now. Maybe not ever. The person who's truly locked in doesn't reach for the phone at all. Their eyes stay on your face. Their body leans in, or at least stays still. There's no competing gravitational field, and you feel that too. The quiet relief of being the most interesting thing in the room. What matters is the pattern, not the single touch. Once or twice is human. Everyone gets a restless hand. But if you notice it happening every time you talk, if their fingers find that phone during your excitement, your worry, your big reveal, that's data. It's not a referendum on you as a person. It's information about where you actually sit in their attention economy, and that matters because you deserve to know. The weird part is, most people won't admit it. They'll insist they're listening, that the phone means nothing, that you're being too sensitive, and maybe sometimes you are. But so is your gut. Pay attention to whether they ever set the phone down first, before you even start talking. That's the person who's already made the choice to listen. That's the soft yes. Watch for it the next time someone leans back and lets their eyes wander while you're speaking. That small, barely visible exhale that comes just before the reach, it tells you everything about how much space you take up in their mind and whether they've decided you're worth the effort of staying present. Screen tilt away from you. You're sitting next to someone scrolling through their phone, and you glance over to see what they're looking at. Without thinking, they rotate the screen away, just slightly, maybe just enough so you can't quite see it anymore. It's fast, it's unconscious, and it tells you something sharp about how much they want you in that moment. The phone angle matters because it's one of those micro movements that happens before the thinking brain catches up. Someone who's genuinely comfortable with you, who doesn't mind you dipping into their world, keeps the screen neutral or even angles it towards you. They're not protecting it. They're not creating distance. But when that device tilts away, they're drawing a boundary, not with words, which would require them to actually decide and communicate, but with their body. It's a form of privacy enforcement that feels innocent but carries real weight. Sometimes it's nothing. Maybe they're checking something embarrassing, a price tag, a message they're still composing. But when it's consistent, when it happens every time you sit close enough to see, it's them saying, "I'm not inviting you into this part of my world right now," without ever having to say it. The tricky part is that most people don't even realize they do it. It's not a conscious choice to shut you out. It's an automatic gesture that reveals comfort levels, trust, or sometimes just the compartments they're keeping sealed off. If someone regularly tilts their screen away from you while they keep it visible to others, that's worth noticing, not as a reason to spiral, but as data. It might mean they're protecting something private. It might mean they don't feel safe enough with you yet to let you see, or it might mean the relationship still lives in the shallow end. Pay attention to who leaves their screen open around you and who doesn't. Those angles are speaking in a language people don't know they're fluent in, and they rarely lie about what matters. Response latency to messages. You send a text at 2 p.m. and they reply at 2:47. You send another at 9 p.m. and they're back in your inbox in 90 seconds. What changed? Not the technology, not your typing speed. Something shifted in how much mental real estate you occupy in their life right now. Response latency, the gap between your message landing and their words coming back, is that invisible ink. Tell that reveals priority without anybody saying a word. It's not about busyness, which is what we always tell ourselves when someone takes hours to text back. Plenty of busy people still manage 2-minute replies to people who matter. What's actually happening is simpler. When someone feels you, they check their phone for you. When you're on the back burner, your message sits in the notification graveyard until they happen to scroll past it. Remember you exist, feel a little guilty, and finally type something. The brutal part is how consistent it becomes. If someone always takes 8 hours, they'll take 8 hours tomorrow too. If they usually light speed reply and suddenly go silent for a day, that's also information. Something shifted. Here's the tricky bit. Some people are generally slow texters with everyone, so you can't hang your entire conclusion on one person's rhythm alone. But within their own pattern, you can spot when you've moved up or down the list with eerie accuracy. The person who texts back in real time to you but makes their best friend wait. That tells you where you live in their mind. The friend who used to reply while their coffee was still hot and now replies the next morning? You already know what happened there. The silence in timing says more than words ever could, and your gut understands the language perfectly. Next time you notice yourself doing that mental math on message gaps, remember, you already know what the lag means. You're just hoping the story you're telling yourself is wrong. Reply length shrinkage over time. Text messages have a pulse, a rhythm that tells you where you actually live in someone's life before they ever say it out loud. 6 months ago, they wrote you paragraphs, stories, details about their day with real questions tucked inside yours. Now you get LOL and OK. The words don't vanish in a single moment. They evaporate like breath on cold glass, one reply at a time. What makes this so revealing is that texting effort costs almost nothing. It takes the same effort to write 1 sentence or 5, so when someone systematically shortens their replies from 3 lines to 1, they're not suddenly busier, they're redirecting their attention elsewhere. You feel it before you can name it. A response that used to arrive in minutes stretches to hours. The depth flattens. No emojis, no jokes, no, "how was your day really?" The punctuation shifts too. Hard periods replace exclamation marks. Follow-up questions disappear like they were never there. People don't usually schedule coldness, they just gradually stop reaching. And here's where most of us get tangled. We treat shrinkage as neutral when it's actually directional data. A long reply doesn't guarantee anything, but a consistent pattern of shorter replies, measured against what came before, reveals something honest about your place in their mind. The trap is that you need weeks, not days, to feel confident in the pattern. One terse message means nothing. 10 terse messages, stacked against the warmth of earlier texts, means everything. So if you're sitting with the question of where you stand, forget the single text and look at the arc instead. Is the attention drifting backward? Do they still write like you matter to them? Or does it feel like you landed on a to-do list? The substance of a message tells truths that careful words hide. The next time you notice the shift, fewer words, longer gaps, less curiosity baked in, don't rationalize it away. Your nervous system is reading something genuine. Trust that signal, because genuine interest always shows up in the generosity of every reply. Punctuation temperature drop. You've probably noticed it without naming it. A text used to end with exclamation marks, and now it ends with periods. Or emojis vanished, or they stopped bothering with lowercase altogether and shifted into something colder, more formal. These small shifts in how someone punctuates aren't accidents. They are the written version of someone stepping back emotionally, and your nervous system feels it even when your conscious mind hasn't caught up yet. The warmth drained out without them saying a word. When someone cares, their punctuation tends to match their voice. Casual, alive, a little loose. They use what linguists call warmth markers. Without thinking, the extra exclamation, the lowercase hey, the string of emojis that feel redundant but actually mean, I'm still here, I'm engaged. But when the emotional weather shifts, punctuation hardens. Suddenly, texts become grammatically perfect, almost stiffly correct, like they're writing to a stranger or a supervisor instead of someone they love. The period at the end of okay instead of okay is a tiny door closing. It's distant. It says, I am doing the minimum required here. The tricky part is that people rarely do this on purpose. It usually signals something beneath awareness, a withdrawal that started before the text was even drafted. Someone might still say they care, while their punctuation is already moving on. So here's what to watch. Not whether they text back, but whether the texture of how they text has shifted. Does their language feel pressed? Are they dropping the small warmth signals that used to be automatic? If yes, something has changed in how present they are with you, and it's probably worth asking about directly instead of trying to decode emoji absence like it's Morse code. The missing exclamation mark is a whisper. Listen to it before the distance becomes loud. Your job isn't to fix the punctuation, it's to notice what it's trying to tell you and decide if it's worth naming out loud. Emoji warmth calibration. Someone texts you something casual and you fire back with a string of laughing emojis, a heart, a little sparkle. They respond with nothing. No emoji, no punctuation quirk, just flat words on a screen. It stings a little, doesn't it? Even though you can't quite name why. That's emoji warmth calibration, and it lives in the spaces between typed characters where honesty leaks through. Here's what's actually happening. People unconsciously match the emotional temperature of the person they genuinely care about. If you matter to them, your enthusiasm gets an answer. Your tone finds an echo. When someone stops adding those small warm signals, the exclamation points, the little emojis, the lol, or the laughing reaction, it's rarely an accident. It's a slow fade they're not even aware they're doing, but you feel it like a draft under a door. The reverse is true too. Notice how differently you text your best friend versus your boss, or your person versus someone you're slowly ghosting. You dial the warmth up or down automatically, like a thermostat adjusting to a room that's cooling. The key thing, people don't often lie in emoji. A smiley can be strategic, sure, but sustained warmth across weeks and months. The casual hearts, the silly stickers, the haha reactions, that's not a performance. That's genuine ease. So if you're wondering whether someone's actually still there for you, stop reading between the lines of what they said and start noticing what tone they're using to say it. A person who's invested finds ways to show you softness, even in text. A person pulling back gets quieter, flatter, more efficient with their words. They're not being cruel, they're just allocating their warmth elsewhere. That shift from emojis to neutrality isn't noise you should ignore. It's data. And the moment you start tracking these patterns across months, you'll know things about people's real feelings that they haven't even admitted to themselves yet. Voice note versus text choice. Someone in your phone right now has sorted you into a category without ever naming it. You're either a voice note person or a text person to them, and that choice lives in their fingers before their conscious mind catches up. When someone sends you a voice note instead of typing, they're handing you something that can't be undone. Tone, breath, the tired dragging through their words, the sigh that sits between sentences. You can't edit out vulnerability. You can't delete and rewrite a confession. That's the whole point, and they know it. Voice is skin in the game. You have to mean it. It means they trust you enough to sound unfiltered, to let you hear them at their least polished, which is what intimacy actually looks like when it's not dressed up as anything else. But watch the reverse pattern, because it cuts sharper. If someone voice notes everyone else in their life, but sends you only text, even when you're talking about real things, you've landed in the efficiency slot. The "I'm in a meeting but owe you a response" person. You're not the "I want you to hear me" person. Now track what gets the voice treatment. Is it the jokes that live in inflection, the confessions that needed room to breathe, the late-night thoughts that spiral best out loud? Those patterns don't lie. Text is distance wrapped in plausible deniability. It's a wall built from spacing and punctuation that lets someone take things back. Over time, the pattern becomes unmistakable. If they voice note you, the vulnerable thing, but text the headline to everyone else, that's a signal. Someone choosing the channel that costs more because they decided you're worth it. Context matters. Some people struggle with typing, or they live in their car, but beneath the noise, the real tell is consistency. Which version of you gets their voice, and which one gets their thumbs? Pay attention to that sorting. It's how they're telling you where you actually live in their life. Typing indicator hesitation. Watch that little bubble appear. 3 dots bouncing, and then it stops. Comes back, stops again. Your stomach tightens a little. You know exactly what's happening. They're composing something, deleting it, rewriting it, maybe reading it back. The pause itself becomes a language. Most people never think about how much their drafting habits leak their actual emotional state, especially when they care about getting the tone exactly right. Someone who types freely, without hesitation, sends quick replies, doesn't agonize over a single word. They've made peace with talking to you. They're not managing the interaction, not performing, not terrified of the gap between what they mean and what you'll hear. But watch someone who starts typing, stops, starts again, maybe lets 30 seconds pass before a single sentence lands. That's someone editing their words because they're afraid of how you'll take it, or they're unsure if they want to say it at all, or they're calculating whether vulnerability is safe with you. The hesitation is real psychological labor. It means they care enough about the risk of getting it wrong to worry. They'll upset you, or reveal too much, or sound foolish. Here's where people get it backwards. They read the hesitation as coldness, as distance, or disinterest, when it's often the exact opposite. Someone dashing off "LOL okay" without thinking, doesn't care if you misread them. Someone who types, deletes, rewrites, and then sends 3 carefully chosen sentences. They do care. That said, if this becomes the permanent pattern, always hesitating, always editing, never quite arriving at a decision or real opening, that signals something different. Real ambivalence, a person who hasn't decided if you matter enough to stop second-guessing themselves. The difference is time and repetition. One moment of careful typing is tenderness. Weeks of it might be someone still shopping around, still on the fence. Notice which one it is, and you'll know where you actually stand with them. Read then reply later pattern. Your message sits there with that little read receipt beneath it. 2 minutes go by, then 20, then a day. When they finally write back, it's brief, almost obligatory, or worse, they answer with a question that makes you do the talking again. The read receipt is the giveaway here, not the eventual reply. It says, "I saw you, I just didn't want to answer right now." There's a real difference between someone who doesn't read your messages and someone who reads them, thinks about whether to engage, and chooses to delay. That delay itself is the signal, and it suggests they're managing their emotional energy or their interest carefully around you. They're not ignoring you. That would almost be cleaner. Instead, they're doing that thing where they keep you in a holding pattern, aware but not quite present. Maybe they're overwhelmed. Maybe they're avoiding a difficult conversation. Maybe they're just not that invested and don't feel the urgency tendency to break the silence immediately. The part that matters most. Watch whether the delay is consistent or random. Someone who occasionally reads late and replies slowly because they're genuinely buried in work looks completely different from someone who reads your message instantly but replies to you 3 hours later while posting to their story within minutes. One is just how their life works. The other is a choice about where you sit in their attention hierarchy. And here's what makes this pattern so quietly revealing. Delays can feel less harsh than an outright no or a cold read and ignore. It can feel like maybe they care, just not right now. You might even convince yourself the timing is innocent, but the real message isn't hidden in the words. It's right there in the timing itself. How someone prioritizes you in their mental queue, whether they're doing it consciously or on autopilot, tells you something their words often won't say out loud. The pattern is what matters, not the one exception when they replied fast. Who ends the conversation? You're on the phone with someone and there's a natural pause. One of those moments where either person could hang up, where the conversation has found its resting place. Both of you know it. So, what happens next? Does one person fill the silence with, "Okay, I should let you go"? Or do they keep talking, asking another question, finding one more reason to stay in the space? Watch this closely because it reveals something unspoken. The person who ends a conversation is often the person who has somewhere to be, someone waiting, or somewhere they'd rather be. But the person who keeps extending it, who throws out one more topic, who says, "Wait, one more thing," that's someone not ready to leave yet. There's a hunger there. Some people do this unconsciously because they genuinely enjoy the air between you. Others do it because they're checking for reciprocation, waiting to see if you'll match their effort and ask them to stay longer. Here's the pattern that stays invisible in most relationships. People who care tend to let the other person end things first. It feels safer that way. If you hang up, you might miss them reaching for you. If they reach for you, you know they wanted to. But someone truly indifferent, they'll pivot to the exit the moment conversation becomes effortful. No second question. No, "Oh, one more thing." They're already halfway out the door in their mind. The stickier signal is watching whether someone ends calls with a future date attached or without one. "Talk soon" or "Can't wait to see you" means they're already building the next meeting in their head while still in this one. "Okay, bye," with no anchor point, they're not projecting you forward, they're not imagining a reason to talk again. So the next time you're on a call, don't focus on what you're saying. Focus on who stopped saying anything first and how they frame the goodbye. That tiny timing, that small choice of words, teaches you something nobody admitted out loud. Who initiates the plan? Look back at the last 3 times you hung out with someone. Who texted first? Who said, "We should grab coffee"? Who booked the restaurant or picked the movie? That person is showing you something real, and it's rarely what the tired wisdom suggests. There's a myth floating around that whoever initiates cares more, but the actual signal is subtler and more honest than that myth allows. Watch instead for the pattern. Does this person initiate sometimes, or never, or always? The rhythm tells you whether you live in their active thoughts or just in their, "Oh sure, let's do that" reflexes. The automatic yes that costs them nothing. Someone who genuinely misses you will occasionally reach out without waiting for you to organize things first. Not constantly, because that can be anxiety or need masquerading as affection, but maybe every 4th invitation comes from them, unprompted, or every other time. Or they'll suggest a specific thing they know you love. That texture of reciprocal care feels different than obligation. Someone who only responds, who waits for you to be the engine every single time, has already answered the question without words. They're not avoiding you or being rude. They're just showing you that maintaining contact requires effort from them that they're not choosing to spend. There's a flip side worth noticing too. Sometimes you're the one always initiating because you haven't noticed they've started taking smaller steps instead. A text out of the blue, "This song made me think of you." A reply that's longer than necessary. People show up differently, depending on what they have left to give. But if months pass and you're still the only one creating reasons to be together, you're seeing that the effort is one-directional, and that's clarity, not rejection. The next time you feel the urge to reach out, pause and count back. When was the last time they did? The answer will tell you exactly where you stand. Ratio of invites extended. Think about the last time someone said yes to hanging out with you. Did they suggest it first, or did you always text the group chat? There's a brutal honesty in who starts the momentum. When someone genuinely wants you around, They don't wait for your initiative. They send the invite. They say, "We should get coffee," and actually mean it enough to pick a day. They text you about concerts they're going to before they even decide whether to go. The ratio between invites you send and invites you receive is like a heartbeat monitor for the relationship. It tells you whether the pulse is strong or if you're the one keeping it alive. Most people won't admit this dynamic bothers them, but it festers quietly. You start keeping score without meaning to. You notice you've reached out 7 times in a row. You realize every single hangout requires you to be the architect. And then the quiet math happens. You start declining, testing whether silence brings them back. It rarely does. Here's what makes this so revealing. It's not about busyness or logistics. Someone who cares finds friction worthwhile. They make the ask. They take the planning hit. But someone comfortable with you doing all the work? They've already decided what you're worth to them. Not worth abandoning, maybe, but not worth risking a no for. The stickiest part, this isn't always about romantic partners. Friends do it too. Family does it. And most of us have at least one person in our orbit who we only see because we keep pulling. The question isn't whether they'd enjoy your company if you showed up. It's whether they ever think about showing up themselves. If you're the only voice saying, "Let's do this," you're not building a relationship. You're performing for an audience that came to the show but didn't buy a ticket. Watch the pattern for 3 months without changing anything. What you see is what you get. Plans with a defined end. You meet for coffee and they say, "I've got about 45 minutes before I need to head out." Notice how that landed. Not because they're busy, everyone is, but because they told you the fence before you stepped inside it. When someone genuinely wants to be around you, the clock dissolves into background noise. They might glance at their phone once, forget about it, and suddenly an hour has passed because the conversation was worth it. But when someone maps the exit before you've even sat down, they're doing something quieter. They're protecting their time from you, specifically. It's not rudeness exactly. It's the calculus of obligation, meeting the reality of priority, and you just landed on the losing side of that equation. The reverse is also true. Someone who loves being around you will extend plans that were supposed to end. "I should probably go, but honestly, I'm having too good a time." That sentence does not come from duty. It comes from wanting more of you, not less. And they didn't set a timer to begin with. The undefined duration. Coffee that turns into lunch, that turns into a walk. That's the signature of someone who isn't counting down until escape. They arrived without knowing when they'd leave, because the end point never mattered. You mattered more than the schedule. Here's where it gets subtle. Context matters, of course. A therapist has a defined end because it's professional structure, not coldness. A doctor's appointment is the same way. But a friend, a partner, someone who cares about you doesn't compartmentalize time with you in advance. They show up open-ended, willing to stay late, willing to let things breathe. When someone repeatedly sets a boundary on your time before anything has even started, what they're really saying, quietly, without words, is, "I've already decided how much of my energy you get, and it's not more." Pay attention to who arrives without a hard stop waiting. That's who's actually here. Cancellations without a reschedule. A text lands on Tuesday morning. "Hey, can't make it Friday." Then nothing. "No, let's do next week." Or, "How about the following Thursday?" Just the door closing, the invitation floating in the void. Most people feel the small sting of it, then move on. It's one cancellation, not a referendum. But watch what happens next. When someone cancels and doesn't offer an alternative, they've done something specific. They've removed themselves from the equation and left the next move to you. They're not saying the plan was bad or the timing is off. They're saying, "I've opted out, and now it's your job to opt back in." That distinction matters because it reveals priority. A reschedule, even if it takes 3 tries, is someone still reaching. They want the thing. The logistics are just tangled. A cancellation with no alternative is someone testing whether you'll chase them. Not consciously maybe, but functionally. Here's where it gets sticky. Life does genuinely derail people. Work explodes. Family stuff happens. Fatigue is real. A one-off cancellation with no reschedule doesn't mean anything by itself. But the pattern is the truth. The person who cancels once and leaves it hanging, then cancels again and again, each time making you the architect of the next connection, that's someone who has quietly downgraded you. They haven't ghosted because they don't want to look like the bad guy. They just don't want to protect the thing between you. The likability threshold is still high enough for a text. It's just not high enough for effort. What catches people off guard is that this person might still seem friendly, might still say yes to plans you initiate. But notice, they never start the engine. They let it idle, waiting to see if you'll push. The move isn't to chase harder or reschedule faster. The move is to stop being the only person in the room willing to build a bridge and read what their silence actually means. Bumping you for better offers. You've had plans locked in for 3 weeks. Dinner Friday night. They confirmed twice. Then Wednesday afternoon, a text lands. Something came up, can we reschedule? What came up? A person with higher status, a group that feels more fun, an opportunity that feels shinier. The thing is, rescheduling itself isn't the sin. Life happens, and flexibility matters. But there's a particular flavor to the bump that tells you where you rank. And it comes down to the why they're telling you, and how much they're willing to lose to make it right. Someone who genuinely values you will move mountains to protect the commitment, or they'll offer a real apology before asking, plus a concrete new date that matters equally. They'll explain why the reschedule was necessary, not why the other thing is obviously better. They won't make you feel like you were plan B the whole time. When someone bumps you for something glittering, they're essentially saying, you're flexible, understanding, reliably there, you'll stay. There's no cost to rearranging you because you've already absorbed the cost of uncertainty. And the real tell is whether they're aware that bumping hurts, whether they factor your disappointment into the calculation at all, or whether you simply become a scheduling problem to solve, a logistical puzzle, not a person with actual feelings attached. The inverse is equally loud. Someone who protects time with you, who declines better, offers to stay true, who bumps them instead. That's not about having low standards or fear of missing out. It's about priority, the quiet, unglamorous decision that you matter enough to disappoint someone else for. The texture of their choice, whether it's casual or careful, whether they seem to notice the hurt at all, whether they scramble to fix it or drift past it, tells you exactly where you live in their world. Watch closely not just what they cancel, but how they cancel and what they'd lose to keep you. Public credit for your ideas. You walk into a meeting where your colleague presents something you came up with last week over coffee. They don't mention your name. They say, I thought of this, or worse, they say nothing at all, just slides, data, their voice filling the room. Your stomach knows what that means before your brain catches up. When someone actually cares about you, they don't hoard the light. They turn it towards you in front of the people who matter. This isn't about ego or needing constant praise. It's about whether they see you as someone worth defending in rooms you're not in. Think about the people in your life who do this naturally. When they've used your insight, your joke, your solution, they say your name. They might say, Sarah mentioned this to me, or I was talking to Marcus and he pointed out. There's no hesitation, no strategic pause where they could have claimed it. They just give it back to you without friction. The flip side is darker, someone who consistently takes credit, who smooths over your contributions or mentions them in the most minimal way. They're sending you data about how they see you. Maybe you're useful to them. Maybe you're a stepping stone. Maybe you're not even fully real to them outside of what you can provide. It's the kind of small gesture that compounds over time. 1 time could be distraction or momentum. 10 times is a pattern. 100 times is their actual relationship to your worth, baked in. The trickiest version is the half credit, when they mention your name but downgrade it. She had a decent point instead of she nailed it. He thought of something similar when your idea was the entire foundation. Watch how people talk about you when you're gone. That's where the real heat is. Not the grand gestures, not the birthday text. The mundane, reflexive choice to say your name in front of others, the way they choose to frame what you brought to the room. Reflected glory versus deflection. You just got the job. You call them excited, needing to hear it land somewhere. Watch what happens next. Do they sit with your win, ask questions, maybe even tell someone else about it with real pride? Or do they pivot hard to their own struggles, their own news, their own thing? That pivot is the tell. When someone genuinely cares about you, your good news doesn't threaten them. It actually feels safe to bask in it a little, to let your light make them look good by proximity. Psychologists call this reflected glory, the warm glow of being close to someone winning. But here's where it cuts deeper. People who feel threatened by you, or who need to stay centered in every conversation, will deflect. They'll minimize it, reframe it as lucky, call it timing, or immediately turn the spotlight back to themselves. It's not always cruel. Sometimes it's just old anxiety, the fear that your success means less room for theirs, a scarcity mindset baked in from childhood. But the pattern matters more than the excuse. Over weeks and months, you start to notice something quiet and true. With certain people, you learn to announce wins quietly, if at all. With others, you can't wait to tell them. That difference is not random. It's the people who can genuinely celebrate you, without needing the celebration to be about them. who are actually safe to be vulnerable around. Because if they can sit with your joy without sabotaging it, without making it weird, without stealing the moment, or immediately one-upping you, they've already shown you something real, that your happiness doesn't cost them theirs. They're not running a zero-sum game in their head. Watch for the ones who ask follow-up questions 2 weeks later, who tell the story to others with actual pride, who don't need to remind you they had it harder first. Those are the people building with you, not competing against you, and they're rare enough to keep close. Congratulations with a but. You just landed the job. You call them right away, voice high, ready to share the best news. And they say, "That's great, but isn't the commute going to be brutal?" Or you ace the presentation and they hit you with, "Nice work, though I would have done the lighting differently." The congratulation arrives, but it comes with a hook attached, and suddenly your win tastes like vinegar. What you are watching is a pattern called stealing the good, and it tells you something raw about how safe they feel when you win. People who genuinely celebrate you can sit with your joy without needing to redirect it, subtract from it, or make it about themselves. They say, "That's incredible," and they mean it straight. No footnotes, no reruns of their own story, no but. The but is the tell. It can sound like concern disguised as wisdom, but be careful not to burn out. Or like a subtle correction, or like they are just thinking out loud. But the structure is always the same. You get a crumb of acknowledgement followed by a small reframing that makes you question the victory, or makes them the one who knows better, or plants doubt where there was only momentum. Sometimes it comes fast, before they even congratulate. Sometimes it's gentler, wrapped in what sounds like advice. Either way, it works. You walk away feeling like you have to defend your good thing instead of breathe into it. The people who love you straight do not need to pad their praise with caution or correction. They trust your joy. They trust that you will figure it out. They can celebrate without commentary because your win does not threaten them or force them to prove anything. If someone does this once, maybe they are just tired. But if you watch for it, if you notice the but pattern repeating, you are watching someone who feels competitive with you, not connected to you. That distinction matters more than it feels. Envy leakage after your win. You just told someone close to you about something good. A promotion, a compliment you got, a thing you made that landed right. And there it is, a half-second flicker across their face before the congratulations lands. Their smile doesn't quite reach their eyes. They ask a question that's technically about you, but somehow pivots to them. Or they go quiet, then pivot to something you did wrong last month. That micro-expression is envy leakage, and it's one of the most honest tells there is, because people usually can't control it. The body speaks before the mouth catches up. Real joy for someone else looks a certain way. It softens the face. It asks follow-up questions that linger on your experience. It doesn't immediately redirect. Envy does the opposite. It tightens. It minimizes. It finds the catch or the flaw, or suddenly remembers when you failed at something similar. Some people will sit with their envy, feel it, and move past it in a breath. Those people can usually still be present for you, even when something in them stings. But others wear it like a fresh wound, and it leaks everywhere. Into their tone, their questions, the way they mention their own accomplishments right after you've shared yours, as if they need to rebalance the room. The tricky part is this. Envy doesn't mean they don't care about you. Sometimes the people who care most struggle hardest with seeing you win because your life feels tangled with theirs. Their own hunger for the thing you got can make them small in ways they don't like about themselves. But that leakage is information. It's telling you how much space they have for your good news. If you watch for it, you'll start to notice who can truly hold your joy alongside their own feelings, and who needs you to stay smaller so they can feel okay. That's not judgment. That's just you learning who you can be fully yourself around. Schadenfreude, flash of relief. You tell someone you trust about a failure, a missed promotion, a botched presentation, a relationship that crumbled, and for a fraction of a second, their face changes. Not sympathy, not concern. Relief, the kind that flashes across a person's features before they catch themselves and rearrange into the appropriate expression of support. That micro-expression is real. It tells you something they will never say out loud. They are glad it was you and not them. Schadenfreude, pleasure at another's misfortune, is usually buried under layers of social training and self-image. We learn early that admitting joy at someone else's loss marks us as cruel, so we hide it. But the body keeps score faster than the brain can lie. That split second of relief happens because your struggle made them feel safer, less alone in their own fears, less at risk of being the one who messes up. And sometimes, it's even darker than that. Your setback might mean you are no longer ahead of them in ways that made them insecure. The tricky part is this: it does not necessarily mean the person is cruel or that the relationship is hollow. It means they have been threatened by you. Even if you never intended to threaten, you succeeded where they struggle. You were chosen where they were passed over. You healed from something that broke them. So that flash of relief is partly about your pain easing their comparison anxiety, and partly about the ego getting a quiet win. Watch for the recovery time. Someone who catches themselves fast, who then leans in with real care despite the initial impulse, shows you their better nature winning over their smaller self. Someone who settles into that relief, who keeps it alive in their eyes, that is someone keeping score. Not all schadenfreude is a verdict on the relationship, but the speed of that flash and what they do next will tell you whether you are safe with them or just convenient. Comfort with your bad news. Watch what happens the moment you tell someone something fell apart. Most people pause. They get quieter. They're already calculating the labor of caring, whether they have the bandwidth, the emotional credit in the bank, the patience to hold space without immediately pivoting to silver linings or their own similar story. Then comes the real tell. Do they lean in anyway, or do they lean back? Do they ask a follow-up question that shows they actually listened, or do they offer a hasty platitude and glance at their phone? The person who genuinely cares about you doesn't rush to make your bad news feel better so they can feel better. They linger in it with you. They ask, "What happened?" instead of "at least." They don't minimize. They don't compete with their own stories. When you tell them something fell apart, they resist the urge to immediately brighten it up and say you'll bounce back, because they know what you need right now isn't optimism. It's someone to believe that this actually matters. But here's the subtle part that separates the truly invested from the socially obligated. Notice if they circle back. A day later, a week later, they text and ask how it's going. They remember what you said. They don't act like the conversation closed itself after you finish talking. People who love you don't treat your pain like a checkbox they've already marked off. Some people are built to run toward bright things and away from dark ones. That's not a moral failure. It's just their wiring. But the ones who stay, who ask again, who don't turn your crisis into a performance of their own optimism, those are the ones worth paying attention to. Knowing who actually sits in the room when things fall apart is one of the clearest mirrors you'll ever hold up to who matters most. Sympathy volume mismatch. You tell someone you're stressed about a presentation. They say, "Oh, that's rough," in the same tone they'd use for a weather update. Then their friend mentions a canceled lunch, and suddenly they're animated, leaning in, asking follow-up questions, and you notice the emotional response didn't match the weight of what you said. Sympathy volume mismatch is when someone's emotional temperature stays locked at one setting no matter what you bring them. It's not always cruelty. Sometimes they're distracted, or they register your words but don't register you behind them. Other times, it means they've already decided how much mental real estate you get. The honest part is that we all do this sometimes. You might give short answers to someone's crisis because you're burnt out, or you light up for a stranger's story because it touches something alive in you that day. But the pattern is what speaks. If someone consistently delivers the same flat, whether you're saying you got the job or your dad's in the hospital, they're not calibrating to you. They're performing presence. Real attention modulates. It rises and falls with what matters. Real care has volume, and you'll hear it in how fast they text back, the length of their pauses before answering, whether they remember the small details from last week and circle back unprompted. When sympathy stays stuck at baseline, polite, consistent, unmoved, it usually means you're being heard but not felt. That doesn't make them bad. It just means the resonance isn't there, or they haven't learned how to meet you at the level you need. The quiet move is to trust your gut about it first. If you felt unseen in that moment, you probably were. Then ask yourself if you want to keep pouring into a connection where the volume never rises for you, where the caring only ever comes in one temperature, one speed, one height. People show you their capacity through these tiny shifts. Listen for them. Teasing that targets insecurity. You mention you're self-conscious about your laugh, or your job search, or the way you look when you haven't slept, and later that week, they bring it up as a joke. Not meanly, maybe, not even obviously, but you feel the hit anyway. Your chest tightens. You laugh along because calling it out would make you look fragile. And that's where the real move lives. Someone who actually cares about you teases the things that don't wound. They might joke about your terrible sense of direction, your weird food combinations, the way you always show up late. Surface-level quirks, not the tender spots where you're already critical of yourself. But someone who's testing your boundaries or working out some jealousy does the opposite. They locate your vulnerability like a bloodhound, then wrap it in plausible deniability. I'm just kidding around. Can't you take a joke? It's not that serious. But your nervous system knows the difference between affection and ambush, and it sends you a signal every time. The pattern matters more than any single comment. If they keep circling back to the same insecurity, your body, your intelligence, your choices, your background, your family, that's not humor. That's someone reminding you of your weaknesses, keeping you slightly off balance, making sure you know they see what you're afraid of. It's a power play, wearing a smile, and it has teeth. Pay close attention to how you feel after, not during the moment. If you find yourself smaller, quieter, more guarded with them, if you're rehearsing comebacks in your head or avoiding certain topics to stay safe, if you've started holding your actual self back to avoid the next jab, that teasing isn't innocent or harmless. Real closeness doesn't require armor. It loosens you. It makes you safer, not smaller, more visible, not more exposed. When someone loves you, they protect the soft parts, even when they're joking around. Humor punching down at you. There's a moment when someone makes a joke at your expense and the room goes quiet. Maybe it's about your job, your body, something you said wrong last week. Everyone laughs, they're smiling, still in joke mode, and they might even say, "I'm just kidding," or, "I love you." But here's what happened beneath that laugh. They chose you as the target, not because they were being cruel. Sometimes it's just mechanical, but because part of them tested whether they could. Humor has this strange permission structure built in. You can say harsh things if you frame them as funny. You can wound someone and call it banter. The person doing it gets to stay likable. The person being aimed at has to prove they're a good sport by laughing along, or risk being seen as defensive, uptight, or lacking a sense of humor. The real tell isn't whether someone jokes around. It's the direction of the punch. People who genuinely like you joke with you, not at you. The humor includes you, involves your shared history, doesn't require you to be smaller for the laugh to land. When someone punches down, they're establishing a vertical line. You're the one who can be safely mocked. Your vulnerabilities become material. That's not friendship checking its own ego. That's someone testing their power over you, then filing that knowledge away for later. Pay attention to whether they do it once or as a pattern. One joke could be a misfire. Repeated jabs at the same wound? That's someone who's noticed where you're tender and decided that knowledge was entertaining. They might genuinely like you otherwise, but they've also registered that you'll tolerate it, that you'll laugh to keep the peace. The next time they joke at your expense, watch what happens inside you, that small flinch you try to hide. That's your gut telling you something honest about how safe you actually are with them, and whether they see you as someone to protect or someone to quietly test. Defensive response to feedback. You mentioned something small. Maybe they cut you off mid-sentence, or they forgot to text back. Instead of a pause or a laugh, they go rigid. Their jaw tightens. Suddenly, they're listing all the reasons you're wrong, or bringing up something you did wrong 3 months ago, or explaining why your observation doesn't actually matter. The feedback itself was gentle. The reaction tells a different story. What you're watching is fear dressed up as righteousness. When someone feels genuinely secure with you, criticism bounces off or lands soft because there's no threat underneath it. But when someone gets defensive fast and hard, they're telling you they're protecting something. Maybe their image in your eyes, maybe their own brittle self-belief, maybe the fantasy of who they want to be versus who they actually are. The speed of the defense is the real signal. A person who trusts you, who feels safe in your judgment, might disagree or push back, but there's no wall going up. There's no counterattack. There's no sudden recalibration of how they treat you next. Defensive people often cool off with you after feedback, even small feedback. They become quieter, more formal, a little bit punishing. They're not angry at what you said. They're angry that you saw something in them they didn't want seen. And here's what matters. If someone cannot hear a small thing from you without going into siege mode, they're signaling that they can't be vulnerable with you, that they need you to see them a certain way, that your honesty is actually a threat to the version of themselves they're trying to maintain. This doesn't mean they don't care about you. Sometimes defensive people care intensely. It means they care more about controlling how you see them than about letting you see them clearly. That asymmetry is worth noticing because it tells you something about the depth of trust that's actually available in the relationship and whether there's room for you to be honest without paying a price. Apology quality and specificity. When someone tells you they're sorry, pay attention to the skeleton of that sentence. Most people autopilot through the same hollow shape. "I'm sorry you felt that way." and expect the room to soften. But watch what happens when someone actually cares. They stop the blur. They say what they did, not what you felt. I snapped at you when you asked a simple question, and that wasn't fair, lands in a completely different body than, I'm sorry if I was harsh. The first is specific to you. The second is an apology to anyone upset about anything. Vagueness is not laziness. It's a sign they haven't replayed the moment yet, haven't sat inside what they did to you. Specificity means they have. They've thought about the exact thing, the context, the trust they broke, or the moment they failed. They've felt it. The real tell, though, is what comes next. People who are actually changing don't make grand promises. They name the small behavioral shift. Next time I feel defensive, I'm going to pause before I respond. Not fantasy versions of themselves. Not someday. Just the concrete thing they'll do differently. That sentence alone says, I've thought about the pattern. I know where it cracks, and I'm uncomfortable enough to interrupt it. People worth trusting aren't those who never mess up. They're the ones whose apologies get more precise over time, sharper in their honesty, more willing to sit in the specific thing they got wrong. Watch for this in the relationships that matter to you. An apology without specificity is someone closing a door. An apology with specificity is someone opening themselves to the exact shape of the damage they caused. That difference, the willingness to be precise instead of general, tells you everything about whether they're actually paying attention to you or just trying to get comfortable again. The next time someone apologizes, notice which version you get. Apology followed by a behavior change. Someone hurts you. They say sorry. Then, 3 weeks later, you realize they've actually stopped doing the thing. Not with fanfare, not with a speech about how much they've grown, just gone quiet on that particular wound. That is not an apology. That is love, trying to speak your language. Words are cheap currency, the kind everyone carries and spends without checking their account. The person who apologizes and changes nothing has made a clear bet. Their comfort matters more than your pain. They want the relief of being forgiven without the friction of becoming different. But when someone apologizes and the behavior actually shifts, when they catch themselves mid-habit and course correct, when they ask you weeks later how you're feeling about it, they are telling you something specific that words alone never could. I see what I did. I know it mattered. You matter. The change doesn't need to be flawless. They might slip under stress. They might revert when tired. But the direction is what speaks. It tells you they are not just managing your emotions. They are managing their own impulse to repeat the hurt. Most people think love is grand. Candlelight dinners, passionate promises made at 2 a.m., the kind of moment that photographs well. But sustained behavior change, the quiet, unglamorous work of not repeating a pattern, is love doing the taxes. It's less romantic and more honest. It asks nothing of you except to notice. So pay attention to the gap between apology and action. Notice who said sorry and then forgot you were ever hurt, who moved on as if the wound was solved by words alone. Notice who said sorry and started showing up differently, smaller and steadier, 1,000 tiny corrections that add up to something real. Watch for the micro moments where they pause, redirect, choose your comfort over their habit. That sustained effort over weeks and months. The person who keeps choosing the harder path is showing you their vote. That gap between what someone promises and what they actually do, between the speech and the small daily work of being better, is where you find out whether you are being loved or merely being managed. Bringing up old grievances. You say something small. Maybe you're 5 minutes late to dinner, or you forgot to text back. And suddenly, they're pulling out something you did 3 years ago. A betrayal, a careless comment, a broken promise. It feels like it comes from nowhere, and it stings because you thought that wound had closed. Here's what that old file being reopened actually means. They're not fighting about now. They're fighting about whether you matter enough to trust again. And every new mistake is evidence added to a case they've been quietly building. People who feel secure with you don't need to catalog your failures. They let things go because they believe you're generally trying. But when someone keeps a running archive, when the past keeps getting dragged into present arguments, it signals something colder. They've already half decided you're unreliable, and they're just collecting proof. It's a way of saying you're on probation without saying it out loud. Sometimes this happens unconsciously. Someone gets hurt once, and their guard goes up. Every time you stumble, it reinforces their fear that you'll do it again. But if you never notice the pattern, if you keep wondering why they're so angry about small things, you miss the real message. They need evidence that you've actually changed, not just promises that sound good in the moment. The weight of this behavior lies not in the old grievance itself, but in what it reveals about the relationship's current temperature. If someone is important to you, and you see this pattern, it might be worth naming directly, not defensively. Gently, I notice when I make mistakes, you bring up things from way back. That tells me you're not sure if you can trust me yet. Sometimes that opens a door to actual repair. Sometimes it confirms they've already left, even if they haven't physically walked out. Either way, you'll know what you're actually dealing with, instead of living in the fog of old fights dressed up as new ones. Keeping score aloud, you pick up the check. 3 weeks later, they mention it. You help them move. Suddenly, you're the person who owes them one. You cancel plans because you're sick, and they list all the times they've shown up for you. Not gently, not as a joke, but as evidence in a case they're building. Sound familiar? When someone keeps score aloud, they're not just tracking favors. They're broadcasting that the relationship feels transactional. That kindness comes with an invisible invoice attached. Most people don't do this lightly. It usually means they've felt used before, or they expect to be, and they're trying to create a ledger where neither of you can escape without paying up. The scorekeeping becomes their armor. If you're the one keeping score, you might tell yourself you're just being fair, but fairness in a real relationship doesn't need a spreadsheet. Real affection doesn't calculate. When you genuinely care about someone, you help them because you want to, not because you're building evidence for a future argument about who's given more. The person who brings up their own sacrifices is usually someone who feels invisible. They need proof that their effort matters, that they haven't been erased. But here's what cuts deeper. If they're saying it aloud to you, they might be testing whether you'll keep count too, or they might be telling you, in the most direct way possible, that they don't feel safe giving without keeping tabs. Either way, it's a signal the relationship has shifted from abundance to scarcity, from trust to protection. A conversation about this, not defensive, not accusatory, but real, can sometimes reset things. You might learn they're terrified of being taken for granted. You might realize you haven't noticed what they've done. But if the scorekeeping continues, even after you try, it's worth asking yourself whether you're willing to live in a relationship where every act of care has a price tag. Some people can't move past that threshold, and that's information worth listening to.